Here is the full script for Part 1, written in English formatted for AI voice-over reading with no headers or special characters, maintaining the length and dramatic tone you requested. I found my daughter sleeping in a rusted van at a gas station while I was driving a truck worth $50,000. I knocked on the window expecting a stranger, but saw my grandson's terrified eyes staring back at me from under a dirty blanket. When I asked where the luxury apartment I bought for them was, my daughter broke down and told me that her husband and his mother had kicked her out 3 days ago because they said she had no right to be there. The rage I felt in that moment was cold and hard, like steel on a winter track. I did not scream. I simply told her to get out and come with me. They thought they could discard my child like trash, but they forgot one thing. They forgot who her father is. Before I tell you how I took everything from them piece by piece, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people understand that you should never mistake silence for weakness. Now let me take you back to that freezing Tuesday night when everything changed. It was 2 in the morning and the wind was cutting through the gas station like a razor blade. I had just come back from a 3-day fishing trip up near Lake Michigan. I needed the quiet. After 40 years as a chief engineer for Union Pacific, the silence of the water was the only thing that made sense to me. My wife, bless her soul, used to say, I loved machines more than people because machines followed the rules. She was right. Machines do not lie. Machines do not betray you. I was pumping diesel into my Ford F-150 watching the numbers tick up on the display. It was a habit of mine to watch the numbers. I liked precision. The station was empty, bathed in that flickering, sickly yellow neon light that makes everything look abandoned. There was only one other vehicle in the lot. It was an old, beat-up cargo van parked in the darkest corner near the air pump that had been broken since the 90s. The back windows were covered with old newspapers taped from the inside. I would not have paid it any attention, but I saw a sticker on the rear bumper. It was a small, faded decal of a cartoon bear, the kind they give out at the elementary school where my daughter Jasmine teaches. It looked exactly like the one I had helped my grandson Leo stick onto Jasmine's SUV a month ago. But this was not an SUV. This was a piece of junk that looked like it belonged in a scrapyard. Curiosity is an engineer's curse. I finished pumping gas, wiped my hands on a rag, and walked over. The closer I got, the more my stomach twisted. The engine was off, but I could hear a faint sound coming from inside. It was the sound of a child coughing, a deep, chesty cough that comes from breathing cold, damp air for too long. I approached the driver's side window. The glass was fogged up from the condensation of breath inside. I wiped a circle on the glass with my glove and peered in. My heart stopped. I mean, it literally felt like the valves in my chest seized up. Curled up in the passenger seat, wrapped in 3 different coats, was my daughter Jasmine. And tucked into the crook of her arm, shivering under a thin wool blanket, was Leo, my 4-year-old grandson. They were asleep, but it was not a peaceful sleep. It was the exhaustion of the desperate. Jasmine's face was pressed against the door, and even in the dim light I could see the dark circles under her eyes and the tear tracks that had dried on her cheeks. I felt a roar build up in my throat, primal and violent, but I swallowed it down. Panic would not help them. Action would. I tapped on the glass, sharp, 3 times. Jasmine jumped so hard she hit her head on the window frame. Her eyes flew open wide with terror. She grabbed Leo and pulled him tighter, looking around frantically as if she expected a monster. When her eyes finally focused on me, the fear didn't leave her face. It was replaced by a shame so deep it broke me to witness it. She didn't unlock the door. She just stared at me, her mouth trembling. Jasmine, opened the door, I said. My voice was muffled by the glass, but she heard the command in it. She fumbled with the lock, her fingers stiff from the cold. The door creaked open and the smell hit me instantly. Stale food, dirty laundry, and fear. The smell of poverty, a smell I had worked 60-hour weeks for 40 years to ensure my family would never have to know. Dad, she whispered. She sounded like she was 5 years old again and had broken a vase. What are you doing here, Jasmine? I asked. I tried to keep my voice level, but I could feel the heat rising in my neck. Where is your car? Where is your home? Why is my grandson sleeping in a van when it is 30 degrees outside? She started to cry, silent heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Leo woke up then. He looked at me with confusion, rubbing his sleepy eyes. Grandpa Walter, he asked, his voice tiny, are we going to a warm place now? That question was like a knife in my gut. I reached in and unbuckled his seatbelt. Yes, Leo, we are going to a warm place. Come here. I pulled him out of the van. He felt light, too light, and his skin was like ice. I handed him my heavy thermal jacket, wrapping it around him until he looked like a little walking bundle of clothes. Then I turned to Jasmine. She wouldn't look at me. She was staring at her hands, picking at a loose thread on her coat. "Talk to me, Jasmine," I said. "Now." "They kicked us out, Dad," she choked out. "Who?" "Brandon. And his mother. Patricia." I felt a pulse throb in my temple. Brandon Miller, my son-in-law. The man who wore three-piece suits and talked about cryptocurrency and leverage, but never seemed to have a job that offered a paycheck. And Patricia, the woman who looked at me at the wedding as if I were the hired help until she found out I paid for the reception. "What do you mean they kicked you out?" I asked, my voice dropping an octave. "That apartment is in your name. I bought it for you. It was my wedding gift." Jasmine shook her head violently. "No, Dad. You don't understand. Brandon said the papers I signed, he said they were for insurance, but they weren't. He said the apartment belongs to his company now. And Patricia, she moved in on Friday. She said I was bringing negative energy into her son's investment property." She looked up at me then, and I saw the bruise, a faint yellowing mark on her wrist barely visible under her sleeve. The mark of someone being grabbed and pulled. "They changed the locks, Dad," she sobbed. "They put my clothes in trash bags and left them in the hallway. Brandon said if I tried to come back, he would call the police and say I was trespassing. He said I abandoned the family." "Abandoned," I repeated the word, tasting the bile in it. "You are sleeping in a van." "He took my car keys too," she said. "He said the SUV was leased under his name. I had to rent this van with the last of my cash just to have somewhere to sleep." I looked at my daughter, a woman with a master's degree in education, a woman I raised to be strong, to be proud, and I saw how they had broken her. Not all at once, but slowly, month by month, criticism by criticism, gaslighting her until she believed she deserved this. They had taken her confidence, then her money, and now her shelter. I did not ask any more questions. The time for questions was over. It was time for physics. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. They had delivered the action. I was about to be the reaction. "Get in the truck," I said. "Dad, we can't go back there," she pleaded, wiping her eyes. "Patricia said she has a restraining order. She said she knows people." I took her face in my hands. My hands are rough, calloused from years of handling steel and grease, but I held her gently. "Jasmine, look at me. You are a haze. We do not run. We do not hide in parking lots. Get in the truck." I moved their few meager bags into the bed of my F-150. I strapped Leo into the back seat and turned up the heater until the cab was blasting hot air. Jasmine climbed into the passenger seat, still trembling. I got in behind the wheel and slammed the door. The sound was solid, reassuring. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the gas station, leaving that rusted van behind in the dark where it belonged. The drive to downtown Chicago took 40 minutes. We did not speak. I needed the silence to calculate. I was running through the schematics of the situation in my head. I knew the building. The Millennium Park Tower. I had served on the construction consultation team for the foundation 20 years ago. I knew every beam, every wire, and every security protocol. I also knew exactly how much I had paid for Unit 42B. $600,000 cash. It was my retirement nest egg, converted into a home for my only child. We pulled up to the entrance. It was a glass and steel fortress radiating wealth. The doorman, a young man I didn't recognize, stepped out, but I waved him off and drove straight down the ramp to the resident garage. I still had my transponder. The light on the reader turned red. Access denied. Of course. They had been thorough. I reversed the truck and parked it right in front of the main lobby doors blocking the driveway. I put it in park but left the engine running. "Stay here with Leo," I told Jasmine. "Dad, please," she whispered, grabbing my arm. "Patricia is crazy. She hates us. She hates us." She didn't have to finish the sentence. I knew what she meant. Patricia Miller was a woman who smiled with her teeth but never with her eyes, especially when she looked at people with skin like ours. She tolerated us because of my money. Now that she thought she had the money, the tolerance was gone. "I will be right back," I said. I walked into the lobby. The night concierge, a man named Marcus who had worked there for 10 years, looked up from his desk. His eyes went wide when he saw me. "Mr. Hayes," he said, standing up quickly. I haven't seen you in months." "Good to see you, Marcus," I said, walking past the desk. "I need the elevator override key." Mr. Hayes, I can't, he stammered. Mr. Miller left strict instructions. He said you were no longer authorized on the premises. He said the ownership changed. I stopped and looked at Marcus. He was a good man, a father of 3. He looked terrified. Marcus, I said calmly, do you remember when the generator failed in the winter of 2019 and the whole building went dark? Do you remember who came down to the basement at 3 in the morning and bypassed the circuit to get the heat back on before the pipes burst? You did, sir, Marcus whispered. I built the safety protocols for this building, Marcus. Now you can either give me the key or I can go into the maintenance room and shut down the power grid for the entire block. It is your choice. Marcus hesitated for a second, then reached into his drawer. He slid a key card across the marble counter. Be careful, Mr. Hayes. She is upstairs. She has people over. Thank you, Marcus. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The ride was smooth, silent. I watched the numbers climb. 39, 40, 41, 42. The doors slid open. The hallway smelled of expensive perfume and marijuana. I walked down the corridor to the door that should have had my daughter's wreath on it. Instead, it was bare. I didn't knock. I punched in the emergency master code on the digital lock, 9247. It was the date of my late wife's birthday. I had programmed it as a backdoor access when I bought the place, just in case. The lock beeped. The mechanism clicked. I pushed the door open. The apartment was warm. Too warm. Music was playing soft jazz. And there, sitting on the velvet sofa I had ordered from Italy for Jasmine's baby shower, was Patricia. She was wearing a silk robe that I recognized. It was Jasmine's robe. She was holding a glass of red wine, her legs crossed, looking at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She turned around slowly, expecting perhaps a food delivery or her son. When she saw me standing in the entryway wearing my fishing jacket and grease-stained boots, her expression shifted. It wasn't fear, it was annoyance, like she had found a cockroach on her expensive rug. Walter, she drawled, taking a sip of wine. I must say the security in this building has really gone downhill. I specifically told the concierge that no solicitors were allowed. Where is Brandon? I asked. My voice filled the room, bouncing off the hard surfaces. My son is out celebrating, she said, standing up and tightening the sash of the robe. He just closed a massive deal. We are expanding our portfolio, but I suppose Jasmine already told you her sob story. Poor girl. She really needs professional help. She is hysterical. We had to ask her to leave for her own good. She was becoming a danger to the environment. You kicked a mother and a 4-year-old child out on the street in winter, I said, stepping further into the room. We invited her to leave, Patricia corrected, walking towards me with a smirk. And since Brandon is the legal owner of this unit now, thanks to the documents Jasmine signed so willingly, we have every right to decide who stays and who goes. She stopped 2 feet in front of me. She smelled of expensive Chardonnay and malice. Now she said, her voice dripping with venom, "Get out of my house, Walter, or I will call the police and tell them an aggressive man is threatening a defenseless woman. And we both know who they will believe. Look in the mirror, Walter. You are just an old man in dirty clothes. I am the owner of a penthouse. Know your place." I looked at her. I looked at the arrogance in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought the paper beat the rock. She had no idea she was standing on a trap door. "I am going to leave Patricia," I said, my voice dangerously low. "But before I go, I want you to look around this apartment. Look at the view. Look at the furniture. Look at the wine in your hand. Because this is the last night you will ever sleep peacefully. You took my daughter's key. That was a mistake. But insulting my dignity, that was a fatality." I turned around and walked out. As the door clicked shut behind me, I heard her laugh. It was a loud, cackling laugh. Let her laugh. I took out my phone as I walked back to the elevator. It was 3 in the morning, but I knew she would answer. I dialed the number for Rachel, the sharpest real estate attorney in Chicago. "Rachel," I said when she picked up, "wake up. We have work to do. I need you to pull the file on the irrevocable trust. Yes, the nuclear option. We are going to war." I stood in that hallway for exactly 10 seconds after Patricia closed the door. My hands were balled into fists so tight that my knuckles were turning the color of ash. I wanted to kick that door down. I wanted to tear through the expensive wood and drag them out by their collars. But I did not. I am a man who built bridges for a living. I know that structural integrity depends on patience, not brute force. I turned back to the elevator, my heart hammering a dangerous rhythm against my ribs. I needed to get Jasmine and Leo out of the cold. As I stepped out into the lobby, I saw him, Brandon. My son-in-law was standing near the concierge desk, checking his watch with an air of boredom. He was wearing a navy blue suit that I knew cost more than my first car. When he saw me, he did not flinch. He did not look ashamed. He smiled. It was that practiced, slippery smile of a man who believes he is untouchable because he knows the right people and says the right things. He walked toward me, blocking my path to the exit. "Walter," he said, his voice smooth and condescending. "I see you have already made a scene upstairs. I expected better from you. You are usually so composed." "Where is my daughter's money, Brandon?" I asked. I did not shout. My voice was a low rumble like a train on a distant track. "Where is the college fund for your son?" Brandon laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "You mean the family investment fund? It is safe. Jasmine agreed to consolidate our assets. She signed the papers, Walter. Just like she signed the paper voluntarily vacating the apartment." "That is a lie," I said, stepping closer. "You locked her out. You changed the codes." "She was unstable," Brandon said, raising his voice just enough for the concierge to hear. "She was having a breakdown. She abandoned the marriage, Walter. She walked out on me and her son. I had to protect my property. I had to protect the equity. If she is sleeping in a van, that is her choice. It is a performance piece to make me look bad. She is manipulative, Walter. You know how emotional she gets." He was doing it right in front of me. He was rewriting reality. He was taking the image of my daughter, a woman who worked 2 jobs to support him while he played businessman, and painting her as a hysterical burden. The rage rose in my throat, hot and sour. I reached out. I did not mean to hit him. I just wanted to grab his lapel to shake the lies out of him. "Do not touch me," Brandon shouted, throwing his hands up in a theatrical defensive posture. He stumbled back even though I had barely grazed his suit. "Help. He is attacking me. Marcus, call the police." I froze. I looked at Marcus, the concierge. He was already on the phone, his face pale. He was not looking at Brandon. He was looking at me. And in his eyes, I saw it. He did not see Mr. Hayes, the man who fixed the generator. He saw a large black man in dirty work clothes advancing on a wealthy white resident. "They are already here," Sir Marcus whispered. At that moment, the revolving doors spun open. A blast of cold air hit the lobby, followed by 2 police officers. They did not walk in. They stormed in, hands on their holsters, eyes scanning for a threat. And in a lobby full of marble and glass, the threat was obvious. "It was me," Officer Brandon yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Thank God you are here." "This man broke into my building. He threatened my mother upstairs, and now he is physically assaulting me. I want to press charges." The first officer, a tall man with a buzz cut and a name tag that read Officer Klein, zeroed in on me. He did not ask what happened. He did not ask for my side of the story. He saw the scene Brandon had set, and he bought it wholesale. "Sir, step away from the resident," Officer Klein barked. "Keep your hands where I can see them. I am not attacking anyone," I said, calmly raising my hands, slowly to shoulder height. "I am Walter Hayes. I own Unit 42B. This man is my son-in-law. He is lying." Brandon cut in, his voice cracking with fake fear. "He transferred the deed months ago. He has no right to be here. He is trespassing. He has a weapon in his truck." I saw him reach for something. That was the trigger. The atmosphere in the room shifted from tense to deadly. Officer Klein unclipped the strap on his holster. His partner, a younger officer, moved to flank me, his hand hovering over his taser. "Turn around," Klein shouted, hands on the wall. "Now. Do it now." I looked at them. I looked at the hate in their eyes. I have lived in this country for 68 years. I have paid my taxes. I have followed the law. I served my community. But in that split second, none of it mattered. I was just a suspect. I was just a body to be subdued. I turned slowly and placed my hands on the cold marble wall, my cheek pressed against the stone. I could hear Brandon exhaling a sigh of relief behind me. "Check his pockets," Brandon instructed them. "He is dangerous." Officer Klein kicked my legs apart. Rough, too rough. He patted me down, his hands searching for a weapon that did not exist. He pulled out my wallet, my keys, and my phone. He tossed them onto the concierge desk with a clatter. "You are lucky Mr. Miller is generous," Klein hissed in my ear. "If it were up to me, you would be spending the night in a cell for assault and trespassing." "I am not trespassing," I said, my voice steady despite the humiliation burning my skin. "My daughter is outside in my truck." "Her name is on the lease." "Not anymore," Klein said. "We checked the registry on the way over. The unit belongs to a limited liability company managed by Mr. Miller. You have no legal standing here." He grabbed my wrist and twisted it behind my back, marching me toward the door. The pain was sharp, shooting up to my shoulder, but the pain in my pride was worse. He shoved me through the revolving doors and out into the freezing night. The lights from the squad car were blinding, flashing blue and red against the snow. Jasmine was screaming. She had jumped out of my truck and was running toward us, Leo clinging to her leg. "Dad! Dad! Leave him alone!" He didn't do anything. "Get back, ma'am!" the younger officer yelled, blocking her path. "It's okay, Jasmine," I shouted. I needed her to stop. I needed her to be safe. "Get back in the truck. Do not give them a reason." Officer Klein pushed me all the way to the curb. He leaned in close, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Here is how this is going to work, Mr. Hayes. You are going to get in your vehicle. You are going to drive away. And you are never going to come back to this building unless you have a court order. If I see your face here again, I will arrest you. Do you understand?" I looked at him. I looked past him to where Brandon was standing inside the glass lobby, safe and warm. Patricia had come down too. She was standing next to her son, her hand on his shoulder. They were watching the show. They were watching the old black man being humiliated by the law. Patricia raised her wine glass in a mock salute. "Do you understand?" Klein shouted again, shoving me toward my truck. "I understand," I said. I understood perfectly. I understood that justice in this moment was not blind. It was bought. I understood that shouting and fighting would only leave my daughter alone and her father in jail. I understood that to win this war, I had to lose this battle. I walked to my truck. My legs felt heavy, but I kept my head high. I climbed into the driver's seat. Jasmine was sobbing in the passenger seat, clutching Leo so tight her knuckles were white. "Dad, I am so sorry," she cried. "I am so sorry." "Hush now," I said. I started the engine. The rumble of the diesel was the only honest sound I had heard all night. I shifted into drive. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror. The police officers were laughing with Brandon. They were shaking hands. It was a club, and I was not a member. I locked eyes with Patricia through the glass one last time. She was smiling. She thought this was the end. She thought she had broken me. She thought that by stripping me of my dignity in front of my child, she had taken my power. She was wrong. She had just given me the fuel I needed. I did not feel fear anymore. I did not feel sadness. I felt a cold mathematical clarity. I reached into the center console and pulled out my old flip phone. I handed it to Jasmine. "Stop crying," I said. "We are going to a hotel, and then we are going to work." "What work?" Jasmine asked, wiping her face. "Demolition," I said. We drove into the night, leaving the flashing lights behind us, but the fire was already burning in my chest, and it would not go out until I had burned their world to the ground. The drive to my house in the suburbs was silent. It was not the comfortable silence of a road trip, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a funeral procession. My house is not a glass tower in the sky like the one Brandon and Patricia now occupied. It is a 2-story brick colonial I bought 30 years ago. It has a wraparound porch and a yard that I mow myself every Saturday. It smells of old wood and lemon polish, not expensive perfume and lies. When we walked inside, the warmth of the furnace felt like a physical embrace. I carried Leo straight up to the guest room. He was still wrapped in my jacket, a small lump of exhaustion. I took off his shoes and tucked him into the bed that used to be Jasmine's when she was a teenager. He mumbled something about his fire truck toy, the one he left behind at the apartment. I stroked his hair and told him I would get him a real fire truck soon. He was asleep before I even stood up. I went downstairs to find Jasmine sitting at the kitchen table. She was staring at her hands, her fingers interlocking and unlocking in a nervous rhythm. I made her a cup of hot cocoa just like I used to when she came home crying about a bad grade or a mean girl at school. But this time the problem could not be fixed with sugar and milk. I placed the mug in front of her. She flinched when the ceramic touched the table. "Drink," I said gently. She took a sip, the steam fogging up her glasses. "Dad, I am so stupid," she whispered. "You are not stupid, Jasmine. You are trusting. There is a difference." Now tell me about the papers, every detail. She took a deep breath. It was about 6 months ago. Brandon came home with a folder. He was stressed. He said the market was crashing and we needed to protect our assets. He said he set up a holding company to lower our tax liability. He called it insurance for Leo's future. He was talking so fast, Dad. He used all these big words. Liquidity, liability, asset protection. I told him I wanted to show you the papers first. I felt my jaw tighten. And what did he say? He got angry, she said, her voice trembling. He said that if I showed you, it proved I didn't trust him as the head of the household. He said you would not understand modern finance because you are just a railroad man. He said I was acting like a child who needed her daddy's permission to be an adult. I didn't want him to think I didn't support him. So I signed. He said it was just a transfer to a family trust. A family trust, I repeated. A trust controlled by him. I didn't know, Dad, I swear. And then, last week he started picking fights. About everything. If the laundry wasn't folded right, he would scream that I was useless. If Leo cried, he said I was a bad mother. He said I was lucky he married me because no one else would want a woman with no ambition. She pulled her cardigan tighter around herself. As she moved, her sleeve rode up. I saw it again, the bruise on her wrist. But in the bright light of my kitchen, I saw more. There was a faint yellowing mark on her neck just below her ear. It looked like the imprint of a thumb. I reached out and gently pulled her collar down. She tried to pull away, but I held firm. There were 3 distinct marks, fingerprints. He grabbed you, I stated. It was not a question. It was an accident, she said quickly, the defense automatic. We were arguing about the keys. He tried to take them, and I pulled back, and he didn't mean to hurt me, Dad. He was just stressed about work. A man who touches a woman in anger does not get to use stress as an excuse, I said. My voice was calm, but inside I was envisioning the amount of pressure required to snap a human radius bone. I had not been in a fight since I was in the army, but the knowledge was still there. He has been hurting you, I said. Only when I make him mad, she whispered. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at my backyard. The oak tree I planted when Jasmine was born was standing tall against the winter wind. It had survived storms, droughts, and pests. My daughter was that tree. Brandon had tried to chop her down, but the roots were deep. Go to sleep, Jasmine, I said without turning around. We are done talking for tonight. But Dad, what are we going to do? He has the lawyers. He has the police. He has a piece of paper, I said. I have the truth. And tomorrow I am going to teach him that the truth is the only thing that matters. Go to sleep. After she went upstairs, I did not sleep. I waited until the house settled into its nighttime rhythm. The clock on the wall ticked. 3:00 a.m., 3:30 a.m., 4:00 a.m. I walked into my study. It is a small room lined with bookshelves. On the wall behind my desk hangs a framed picture of the first locomotive engine I ever redesigned. I moved the picture aside. Behind it was a wall safe. I spun the dial, left to 32, right to 8, left to 19. The tumblers clicked into place with a satisfying mechanical thud. I pulled the heavy steel door open. Inside, stacked neatly, were the things that defined my life's work. My military discharge papers, the deed to this house, a stack of savings bonds, and at the very bottom, a thick manila envelope labeled 42B Millennium Tower. I took the envelope out and sat at my desk. I turned on the green banker's lamp. I took out my phone. It was 4:15 a.m. Most people are asleep at this hour. Rachel isn't most people. Rachel creates nightmares for other lawyers. She picked up on the second ring. Walter, she said. Her voice was crisp, alert. She did not ask why I was calling. She knew I would never call at this hour unless the sky was falling. Is Jasmine okay? She is safe, I said. But we have a situation. Brandon Miller has locked her out of the apartment. He claims he owns it. He claims she signed it over. There was a pause on the line. I could hear the rustle of sheets and the click of a bedside lamp. He claims ownership of a property held in an irrevocable trust, Rachel asked. He tricked her into signing something I explained. He told her it was for tax liability. He gaslit her, Rachel. He has been abusing her, physically and emotionally. I heard the sound of a lighter flicking and a sharp inhale. Rachel quit smoking 5 years ago, but she keeps a pack for emergencies. This was an emergency. Walter, listen to me carefully, she said. If the trust was set up correctly, which I know it was because I wrote it, Jasmine cannot sign that property over. She is the beneficiary, not the trustee. You are the trustee. Unless you signed a document transferring the title, Brandon is holding a piece of toilet paper. I didn't sign anything I said. Then he forged it, Rachel said. Or he used a limited power of attorney to sign on your behalf, which is fraud, if he did not have your specific consent for that transaction. I need you to scan everything you have in that envelope. The original deed, the trust formation documents, the schedule of beneficiaries. I am doing it now, I said, reaching for my scanner. And Rachel added, do not go back there. Do not confront him. If he has the police in his pocket, he is trying to bait you. He wants you to do something violent so he can get a restraining order that invalidates your credibility. He wants to paint you as the angry, aggressive father-in-law. Do not give him the paint. He crossed the line, Rachel, I said. He put his hands on my daughter. I know, she said softly, and we will bury him for it. But we will do it with paper cuts, not fists. Send me the files. I will run a title search as soon as the clerk's office opens its database at 6:00 a.m. I will call you back. I spent the next hour feeding documents into the scanner. The rhythmic whirring of the machine was hypnotic. Page by page, I digitized the proof of my hard work. Every dollar I saved, every overtime shift I worked. It was all there in black and white. I was not just scanning paper. I was loading ammunition. At 6:05 a.m., my laptop pinged. It was an email from Rachel. The subject line was simply, "Got him." I clicked it open. My hand was steady, but my heart was pounding. Rachel had attached a PDF from the Cook County Recorder of Deeds. It showed a transaction dated 2 months ago, a quitclaim deed transferring the ownership of Unit 42B from the Jasmine Hayes Trust to Miller Global Holdings, LLC. I scrolled down to the signature page. There it was. Walter Hayes, trustee. It was a good forgery. He had practiced, but he had made one fatal mistake. The signature was dated October 12th. On October 12th, I was in a hospital in Cleveland consulting on a derailment. I had 5 doctors and 20 engineers who could testify that I was nowhere near Chicago to sign a notary book. I read Rachel's analysis below the document. Walter, this is blatant. He used a remote online notary service that is known for being shady. But here is the kicker. He transferred the property for a consideration of $10. He stole a $600,000 apartment for the price of a sandwich. I sat back in my chair. The sun was just starting to peek through the blinds, casting long stripes of light across the desk. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. I could call the police right now. I could show them the forgery. I could have him arrested for fraud, but that was too easy. If I arrested him now, he would make bail. Patricia would hire a fancy lawyer. They would claim it was a misunderstanding, a clerical error. They would drag it out in civil court for years while they lived in my house. No, I didn't want him just arrested. I wanted him destroyed. I looked at the second attachment Rachel had sent. It was a credit report for Brandon Miller. It was a disaster zone, maxed out credit cards, defaulted car loans, and a massive mysterious debt to a private lending entity that looked suspiciously like a loan shark operation. He didn't steal the house because he wanted to live there. He stole it because he needed collateral. He was drowning, and he used my daughter as a life raft. I picked up the phone and typed a message to Rachel. Do not file the fraud charges yet. Let him think he got away with it. Let him feel safe. I want to see how deep this hole goes. I closed the laptop. I could hear Leo waking up upstairs, his little feet pattering on the floor. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was fully up now, illuminating the frost on the grass. It was going to be a cold day. But for Brandon Miller, the heat was just beginning to rise. I was not going to knock on his door today. I was going to let him rot in his own arrogance for a little while longer. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for him to walk into it. The bank opened at 9 in the morning. I was there at 8:55 waiting by the glass doors. This was not a branch in a strip mall. This was the main downtown office of First National A building with marble floors and ceilings high enough to make you feel small. I had chosen this bank 30 years ago because it felt solid. I wanted my money to be safe. I wanted my grandson's future to be protected by stone and steel. But as I walked in that morning, I realized that stone and steel cannot protect you from a thief who has the keys. I walked up to the desk of a personal banker. His name tag read Justin, and he looked like he had just graduated from college. He was wearing a suit that was too tight and a watch that was too big. When he saw me approaching, he didn't smile. He glanced at my boots. He glanced at my heavy coat. He saw a 68-year-old black man who looked tired and worn down. He assumed I was there to cash a Social Security check or ask for a loan extension. "May I help you, sir?" Justin asked without standing up. His tone suggested that he hoped I would say no so he could go back to his computer. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. It creaked under my weight. I placed my driver's license and my social security card on his polished mahogany desk. "I need to see the balance of the Leo Hayes Educational Trust," I said. "I am the grantor." Justin picked up my ID with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. He typed my name into his computer, sighing loudly. He clicked the mouse a few times, his eyes scanning the screen with boredom. Then he stopped. His hand froze on the mouse. The boredom vanished from his face, replaced by a look of confusion. He leaned closer to the monitor. He typed something else. He hit enter. He frowned. "Is there a problem, Justin?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my stomach was tight. I knew the answer before he said it. I felt it in the air. "Mr. Hayes," he said, his voice changing. He was nervous now. He was looking at me differently. Not with respect, but with pity. "Are you sure this is the right account number ending in 459? "Yes," I said. "That is the account." "Well," Justin cleared his throat. He turned the monitor slightly away from me. A reflex. Banks teach you when the news is bad. According to our records, the current balance of that trust is 0. The word hung in the air between us. 0. $75,000. Money I had saved over 5 years. Money meant for Leo's college tuition. Money meant to give him a head start in a world that would already make him run twice as fast to get half as far. Gone. "Check again," I said. "I have checked Mr. Hayes." The account was liquidated. By whom, I asked. Justin hesitated. He looked at the screen again. The funds were withdrawn via wire transfer by the custodian on record. Mr. Brandon Miller. I closed my eyes for a second. I saw Brandon's face. I saw him smiling at the Thanksgiving dinner table while I talked about Leo's future. He had nodded. He had said it was a great idea to start saving early. All that time he was not listening to a father, he was sizing up a victim. When I asked, Justin scrolled down. A series of transfers starting 4 months ago. The last one was 3 days ago. The account was closed on Tuesday. The same day he kicked my daughter out on the street. He didn't just throw them away. He stripped them clean first. He waited until he had every last cent before he changed the locks. It was not just greed. It was a demolition. I stood up. I reached across the desk and turned the monitor toward me. Justin tried to stop me, saying it was against policy, but I gave him a look that made him sink back into his chair. I took my phone out and took a picture of the screen. "Sir, you can't do that," Justin squeaked. "I just did," I said. I walked out of the bank. The sun was shining outside, but the world looked gray to me. I sat in my truck and looked at the photo on my phone. I zoomed in on the transaction codes. I spent 40 years as an engineer. I know how to read codes. I know that every number tells a story. And these numbers were telling a story of a man who was out of control. I needed to know where the money went. The bank statement only showed the routing numbers of the receiving accounts. It didn't show the names. But I knew people. You don't work for the railroad for 4 decades without making friends in low places and high places. I called a man named Silas. Silas used to work in fraud detection for the state before he retired to run a pawn shop. He owed me a favor from 1998. I read him the routing numbers. He told me to hold on. I heard the clicking of a keyboard and the sound of a television in the background. Walter, Silas said after 2 minutes. "You are not going to like this. Tell me, Silas." The first routing number belongs to a platform called Crypto Exchange. It is an offshore wallet service. Untraceable once it hits the blockchain. That is $50,000 right there, and the rest I asked. The second number is a direct deposit to a holding company in Nevada. But that holding company is a shell for an online sports betting syndicate. DraftKings, FanDuel, all of them. This guy didn't invest your money, Walter. He lit it on fire. I thanked Silas and hung up. I sat there gripping the steering wheel. My knuckles turned white. Brandon Miller had stood in my living room and called me a simple laborer. He had called my daughter irresponsible. He had told the police he was a victim. But here was the truth. He was a gambling addict. He was a man who took the safety net of a 4-year-old child and threw it onto a blackjack table. He had bet my grandson's future on digital coins that didn't exist and football games he didn't play. He was not a businessman. He was a junkie in a suit. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message. The name on the screen made my blood boil. Patricia. I opened it. It was a long message. Walter, it read. We know you went to the bank. Stop snooping around. Brandon had every legal right to manage those funds as the custodian. If you try to accuse him of theft, we will file a countersuit. We will claim Jasmine is mentally unstable and unfit to raise a child. We have witnesses who will testify she is depressed. We will take full custody of Leo. Do not test us. We have more money and better lawyers. Go back to your little house and leave us alone. I read the text twice. We will take Leo. They were not satisfied with the house. They were not satisfied with the money. Now they wanted the boy. They wanted to take the only pure thing left in this mess and turn him into another accessory for their fake life. They wanted to raise him to be like them. I looked at the phone in my hand. It was an old iPhone Jasmine had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. It had our family photos on it. It had my contacts. But now it was a liability. They knew my number. They could track my location. They could harass me. I started the truck and drove to a convenience store 3 blocks away. I walked to the counter and pointed to the cheap flip phones hanging behind the glass. Give me 2 of those, I told the clerk. And 2 prepaid cards. Cash. I walked back outside to the parking lot. I held my old phone in my hand. It vibrated again. Another text from Patricia. Probably another threat. I didn't read it. I dropped the phone onto the asphalt. It landed face up. The screen showed a picture of Leo smiling. I felt a pang of regret, but I pushed it down. This was war. And in war, you cut the lines that the enemy uses to find you. I raised my heavy work boot and brought it down hard. The glass shattered. The plastic crunched. I stomped on it again and again, until it was just a pile of metal and silicon dust. I stood there breathing hard in the cold air. Passers-by looked at me like I was crazy. A big black man smashing a phone in a parking lot. Let them look. They didn't know that I had just severed the last tie to the victim I used to be. I opened the package of the new burner phone. I inserted the battery. It snapped into place. I turned it on. The screen glowed with a generic blue light. No history, no contacts. No way for them to find me. I dialed the number for Rachel. I had memorized it. Rachel, I said when she answered. Walter, she said. I was just about to call you. Don't call my old number, I said. It is dead. Write this one down. This is the only number I exist on now. Okay, she said. She sounded impressed. What happened? I know where the money went, I said. It went to crypto and gambling. All of it, good Rachel said. That proves breach of fiduciary duty. We can use that. No, I said. Not yet. If we sue him now for the money he will run. He will hide. He will declare bankruptcy and we will never see a dime. I want him to feel safe, Rachel. I want him to think he scared me off. What do you mean, she asked. Patricia just threatened to take Leo, I said. She thinks I am afraid. She thinks I am retreating. So I am going to let her believe it. I looked down at the pieces of my old phone. I am going to go silent, Rachel. I am going to let them think they won. And while they are celebrating, I'm going to dig a hole so deep under their feet that by the time they look down, they won't even see the bottom. I hung up the phone. I snapped it shut. The sound was sharp, final. I got back in my truck. I didn't go home. I went to the hardware store. If they wanted to play games with surveillance and threats, I was going to show them what a man who spent 40 years building security systems could do. The bank account was empty. My phone was broken. But for the first time in 3 days, my mind was clear. I knew exactly what I had to do. The hunt was on. I looked at myself in the mirror of the hardware store bathroom. The man staring back was not Walter Hayes, the retired engineer with a portfolio of stocks and a paid-off home. The man in the mirror was wearing a faded gray jumpsuit with the Union Pacific logo stitched on the chest. He had a heavy tool belt slung low around his waist and a baseball cap pulled down tight over his eyes. I had not worn these coveralls in 5 years, but they still smelled of diesel and grease. They were my armor. In America, if you wear a suit, people look at your face. If you wear a jumpsuit and carry a ladder, you become invisible. You become part of the furniture. You become the help. And to people like Patricia Miller, the help does not exist. I drove the truck to the service entrance of the Millennium Tower. It was 6 in the evening. The sun had set, and the windows of the penthouse were glowing like gold teeth against the dark sky. I could see the shadows of people moving up there. They were drinking my wine. They were walking on my floors. They were celebrating their victory. I pulled up to the security gate. The guard booth was manned by a guy named Sam. Sam was a good man. He had been working security there for 15 years. I used to bring him coffee on cold mornings when I visited Jasmine. He looked at my truck, then he looked at me. He didn't smile. He looked worried. "Mr. Hayes," Sam said, leaning out of the window. "You know I can't let you up. They have your picture at the front desk. They said to call the cops if you even stepped on the sidewalk." "I am not going to the front desk, Sam," I said. I held up a work order I had printed on my portable printer in the truck. It looked official. It had the logo of the building's maintenance company. "I am going to fix the HVAC unit on the 42nd floor. The breaker keeps tripping. You know how the wiring is in that north corner." Sam squinted at the paper. He knew the wiring was bad because I was the one who told him about it 3 years ago. He looked at the paper. Then he looked at my eyes. He saw the desperation there, but he also saw the determination. He knew what they did to my daughter. He had seen Jasmine leave with her bags. "I can't authorize a guest, Mr. Hayes," Sam said quietly. "I am not a guest, Sam. I am a ghost." Sam hesitated. He looked at the camera above the gate. Then he looked back at me. "The service elevator is unlocked," he whispered. "The camera in the freight car is broken. It has been broken for a week. Nobody has fixed it yet. Thank you, Sam." "I owe you for that Christmas bonus you gave me last year," he said. "Go, and be careful. That woman is a witch." I drove into the loading dock. I grabbed my tool bag and a 6-foot ladder. I walked into the service corridor. It smelled of garbage and industrial cleaner. It was the veins of the building, the dirty part that the rich people upstairs pretended didn't exist. I pressed the button for the 42nd floor. The elevator rattled and groaned as it ascended. I checked my pocket. I had 3 miniature cameras and 2 high-sensitivity microphones. They were the size of buttons. I had bought them from a spy shop that usually sold to jealous husbands, but tonight they were tools of justice. The elevator doors opened directly into the utility room of the penthouse. This was a feature I had insisted on keeping when I bought the place so maintenance crews wouldn't have to drag equipment through the living room. I stepped out into the dark room. I could hear the party through the door, the sound of clinking glasses, the murmur of voices, the heavy bass of jazz music. I cracked the door open an inch. The hallway was clear. I slipped out, moving quickly and quietly. I was not walking like an old man. I was moving with the precision of a soldier. I made my way to the main living area. The room was crowded. There must have been 50 people there, men in tuxedos, women in glittering dresses. They were standing in groups, laughing, eating canapés off silver trays. I walked right through the middle of them. "Excuse me, coming through electrical hazard," I muttered, keeping my head down and the ladder on my shoulder. Nobody looked at my face. They stepped aside, annoyed that a worker was interrupting their party, but they didn't question my presence. To them, I was just a utility. I was no different than the thermostat or the light switch. I walked over to the large buffet table set up near the balcony. It was covered in a long white tablecloth that draped all the way to the floor. I set up the ladder next to the wall. I pretended to inspect the wall sconce. From this vantage point, I could see everything. And then I heard her voice. Patricia was standing in the center of the room holding a glass of champagne. She was wearing a red dress that was too tight and too bright. Brandon was next to her, looking smug. They were surrounded by a group of people who were hanging on their every word. "It is such a beautiful apartment," Patricia, a woman with a pearl necklace, said. "The view is to die for. How did you manage to find such a prime location in this market?" Patricia laughed. It was a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, you know me, Susan. I have always had an eye for potential. We actually acquired this from a distressed seller." "A distressed seller," the woman repeated. "Yes," Brandon chimed in. His voice was slurred. He had been drinking. It was a sad situation, really. My ex-wife's father, he bought it years ago, but well, let's just say he wasn't exactly sophisticated enough to manage an asset like this. He got in over his head. We had to step in and take it off his hands before the bank foreclosed. We did him a favor, honestly. I gripped the wrench in my hand so hard my fingers cramped. He was lying to their faces, and they were nodding. "Is he... you know..." The woman lowered her voice, but I could hear her perfectly. "Is he one of those urban types?" Patricia smirked. "Oh, absolutely. He is a laborer, a railroad worker. Can you imagine a man like that living in a building like this? He probably didn't even know how to use the bidet." The place smelled of fried grease and cheap cologne when we got the keys. We had to hire a professional cleaning crew to sanitize the whole unit just to get the ghetto smell out. The group burst into laughter. It was a cruel, ugly sound. "Well, it is much better now that you are here," a man in a tuxedo said, slapping Brandon on the back. "It needs the right class of people. You have really elevated the property value just by moving in." "Cheers to that," Brandon shouted, raising his glass. To taking back the neighborhood, I felt a cold fire burning in my gut. They weren't just stealing my house, they were stealing my history. They were erasing my dignity. They were laughing at 40 years of sweat and sacrifice, reducing me to a stereotype so they could feel superior. I climbed down the ladder. I needed to get closer. I needed to plant the microphone right where they were standing. I got down on my knees. I pretended to check the outlet behind the buffet table. I crawled under the long tablecloth. It was dark and dusty under there. I was surrounded by the shoes of the wealthy. Shiny patent leather, red soles. I could smell the leather polish. I crawled forward inch by inch until I was directly behind the spot where Patricia was standing. I could see her red heels. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the microphone. It had a magnetic back. I reached up and stuck it to the metal frame of the heavy oak table. It clicked softly. Then I pulled out the camera. I needed a line of sight. I crawled to the edge of the tablecloth. There was a decorative plant stand right next to the table. I reached out my hand, trembling slightly, and tucked the tiny camera into the dense leaves of the fern. The lens was pointing directly at the center of the room. I was about to pull back when a pair of shoes stopped right in front of my face. It was Brandon. "Mom, wait," Brandon said. He was standing inches from where I was hiding. "I need to tell you something." That lawyer called again, the one representing the old man. Patricia's heels turned toward him. "Ignore him, Brandon. They have nothing. He says they know about the crypto mom. He says they traced the wire transfer." I held my breath. My heart was pounding so loud I was afraid they could hear it through the floorboards. "So what if they traced it?" Patricia hissed. Her voice was sharp now. "You are the custodian. You have discretion. We will just say it was a high-risk investment strategy that failed. It is not illegal to be bad at business, Brandon. It is only illegal to get caught stealing. As long as you stick to the story that Jasmine was incompetent and I had to intervene, we are fine. The judge will look at us, and then he will look at that angry black man and he will make the comfortable choice. The system was built for us, honey. Use it." I pressed the record button on the receiver in my pocket. I had it. I had the confession. I had the intent. I had the racism. I had the soul of their corruption on tape. Suddenly, Brandon dropped something. A napkin. It fluttered down and landed right next to my hand. "Damn it," Brandon muttered. He bent down. I froze. I pulled my hand back, pressing myself as flat as I could against the wall. I saw his hand reaching down. He was inches away from lifting the tablecloth. If he lifted it, he would see me. He would scream. The security would come. The police would come. And this time, with a bag full of spy gear, I would go to jail for real. Brandon's fingers brushed the fabric. "Oh, leave it, Brandon," Patricia snapped. "Don't pick up trash off the floor. That is what the cleaning staff is for. Come on, I want to introduce you to the senator." Brandon hesitated. Then he stood up. "You are right. Let the help deal with it." They walked away. I let out a breath that felt like it had been held for an hour. I waited 10 seconds, then 20. I crawled backward, moving fast. I got out from under the table. I grabbed my ladder. I didn't look back. I walked straight to the utility room door. "Hey, you." I froze. My hand was on the doorknob. I turned around slowly. It was Brandon. He was staring at me from across the room. He looked confused. He squinted his eyes, trying to focus through the alcohol. "Do I know you?" he asked. "You look familiar." I pulled my cap down lower. "Just fixing the AC, boss," I said, making my voice rough and subservient. "All done now." He stared at me for another second, then he shrugged. "Make sure you use the service elevator. I don't want you tracking dirt on my carpet." "Yes, sir," I said. I slipped through the door and closed it behind me. I leaned against the metal wall of the utility room, shaking. I was sweating, but I was smiling. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the garage. I took out my phone and checked the feed. The image was crystal clear. The audio was crisp. I could hear them laughing. I could hear them plotting. I had been a spy for 20 minutes, but I had just gathered enough ammunition to fight a war for 20 years. I got into my truck and drove past Sam at the gate. I gave him a thumbs up. He nodded and opened the barrier. As I drove onto the highway, I looked back at the tower one last time. "Enjoy your party, Patricia," I whispered, "because the hangover is going to be fatal." The kitchen table was no longer a place for meals. It had become a war room. The surface was covered with notepads, pens, and the cheap burner phones I had bought earlier. Jasmine sat across from me, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were puffy and her shoulders were slumped. To the outside world, she looked like a defeated woman. But I needed her to be something else. I needed her to be an actress. "Jasmine," I said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "Read it again." "Dad, I can't do this," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I can't call him. He scares me. Every time I hear his voice, I feel like I am back in that apartment being told I am worthless." "That is exactly why you have to do it," I said. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Listen to me closely. Brandon expects you to be weak. He expects you to be crying. He expects you to be begging. We are going to give him exactly what he expects. But this time, your tears are not a sign of surrender. They are a weapon." I stood up and walked around the table. I put my hand on her shoulder. "I didn't raise a liar, Jasmine. I raised a teacher. I raised a good woman. But right now, being good will not save your son. Being smart will. I need you to channel every ounce of pain he caused you. When you cry on that phone, do not cry because you are sad. Cry because you are manipulating him. Cry because it is the key that unlocks his greed." I picked up the script I had written for her. It was simple. It played on Brandon's ego. It played on his assumption that I was just an ignorant old laborer who didn't understand money. "Read the line, Jasmine," I commanded. She took a deep breath. She wiped her face. She looked at the paper. "Brandon, please pick up. Dad is getting worse. The doctors say it is his heart. He is confused. He keeps talking about the will." "No," I interrupted, too stiff. "You sound like you are reading a grocery list. You need to sound desperate. You need to sound like a daughter who is watching her father die and doesn't know what to do. You need to sound like you need him to save you. Brandon loves to be the savior, remember? He loves to be the man in charge. Feed that ego." Jasmine closed her eyes. She took a moment. When she opened them, I saw a shift. It wasn't confidence, but it was determination. She thought of Leo sleeping upstairs. She thought of the cold van. "Brandon, please," she said, her voice trembling perfectly. "You have to help me. Dad is really sick. He is talking nonsense. He wants to sign everything over, but he doesn't have a lawyer. I don't know what to do." "Good," I said. "That was perfect. Now remember the hook. You have to mention the land. If you just talk about me dying, he won't care. He hates me. You have to make him believe there is a pot of gold at the end of the funeral. The land in the suburbs," she said. "The undeveloped plot. Exactly. He knows I have it. He has been eyeing it for years. He thinks it is worth millions. Tell him I want to give it to Leo, but I need a trustee because Leo is a minor. Tell him I mentioned his name." Jasmine looked at me with disbelief. "He will never believe that. He knows you despise him. He believes he is the smartest man in the room, Jasmine. He believes I am senile. If you tell him I am confused, that I have forgotten the fight, he will believe it because it suits him. Greed is a blinder. It makes people see only what they want to see." I placed the burner phone in front of her. It was a black piece of plastic, cheap and disposable, just like Brandon treated her. "Dial the number," I said. "Put it on speaker. I will be right here." Jasmine stared at this phone. Her hand shook as she reached for it. She dialed the 10 digits that used to mean love and now meant fear. The ringing sound filled the silent kitchen. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings. "He isn't going to pick up," she whispered. "He will," I said. On the 4th ring, the line connected. "What do you want?" Jasmine Brandon's voice was sharp, impatient. I could hear background noise, a restaurant, clinking silverware, laughter. He was out enjoying his life while his wife and child were in hiding. Jasmine choked out. The tears came instantly, real and raw. "Please don't hang up. I didn't know who else to call." "I told you to stop harassing me," Brandon snapped. "My lawyer will be contacting you on Monday about the custody arrangement. We are done talking." "Wait," Jasmine screamed. "It isn't about us. It is Dad." There was a pause. "What about the old man? Did he finally get arrested for trespassing?" "He is in the hospital." Jasmine lied. She squeezed her eyes shut, gripping the edge of the table. "He collapsed this morning. The doctors say it is congestive heart failure. He is not making sense, Brandon. He is drifting in and out." I watched her face. She was doing it. She was selling the lie. I signaled her to keep going. "Why are you calling me?" Brandon asked, but his tone had shifted. It wasn't angry anymore. It was cautious. "Because he keeps asking for you," Jasmine sobbed. "He thinks we are all still together. He is confused. He keeps saying he needs to sign the papers for the land before he goes. He says he wants to secure Leo's future. He wants to make you the trustee of the suburban estate." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I could practically hear the gears turning in Brandon's head. The suburban estate. He had looked up the value of that land 2 years ago. He knew it was 5 acres of prime development real estate. He didn't know I had put it in a conservation easement that made it impossible to build on. To him, it was just dollar signs. "He wants to make me the trustee," Brandon asked. His voice was skeptical, but the greed was leaking through. "He doesn't remember the fight," Jasmine said, lowering her voice to a whisper. "He thinks you are still his favorite son-in-law. The doctor said he might not make it through the week. He has the deed in his safe. He wants to sign it over tonight. He says he can't rest until the family is taken care of." I saw a smile creep onto my face. It was a cold, hard smile. "Is he lucid?" Brandon asked sharply. "If he signs it, will it hold up in court? I don't want to waste my time if he is totally gone." "He has moments," Jasmine said. "He's awake now. He is sitting up. He just needs someone to bring the papers. I can't do it. I don't understand the legal stuff. You know I am not good with money. You always said I was stupid with contracts." She used his own abuse against him. It was brilliant. "Okay," Brandon said. He sounded breathless. "I can meet you, but not at the hospital. I don't like hospitals. Bring him to the Capitol Grill. We are already here having dinner." "Brandon?" "He is sick," Jasmine protested. "If he wants to sign, bring him to me," Brandon commanded. "Or forget it. I am doing you a favor, Jasmine." "Okay," she said. "Okay. We will be there in an hour. Please wait for us." "I will have the notary ready," Brandon said. "And Jasmine, don't pull any tricks. If I see one cop, the deal is off and I take Leo." He hung up. The kitchen went silent again. Jasmine put the phone down. She looked at me. She was trembling, but her eyes were dry now. "He bought it," she said. I nodded. "He bought it because he thinks he is the predator. He thinks he is summoning a dying animal to his table to feast. He doesn't know he just invited the hunter to dinner." "Now comes the hard part," I said. I stood up and walked to the hallway mirror. I looked at my reflection. Tall, broad-shouldered, strong. A man who could still lift 100 pounds of steel. "This man has to disappear," I said to my reflection. I went to my bedroom closet. I dug all the way to the back. I found an old cardigan that belonged to my father. It was moth-eaten and smelled of camphor. I put it on. It was too big for me, hanging loosely off my shoulders. It made me look shrunken. I went to the bathroom. I took a little bit of flour from the kitchen and dusted it into my hair and beard. Not too much, just enough to make the gray look white and brittle. I took out my contact lenses and put on an old pair of reading glasses from the drugstore. They were thick and magnified my eyes, making them look watery and confused. Then I practiced the walk. I have walked with a purpose my whole life. A railroad engineer walks with a heavy stride to test the ground. Tonight, I had to unlearn 60 years of muscle memory. I hunched my shoulders forward. I bent my right knee slightly inward, creating a limp. I dragged my left foot. Shuffle. Pause. Breath. Shuffle. I walked up and down the hallway. I watched myself in the mirror. I let my jaw hang slack. I let my hands tremble. I was not Walter Hayes, the chief engineer, anymore. I was Walter, the confused old man. I was the stereotype Brandon wanted me to be. I went back to the study. I turned on my laptop. I needed one last prop. I pulled up an old medical report from my annual physical. I opened a photo editing program. I am not a graphic designer, but I know how to edit a document. I changed the date to today. I changed the diagnosis. Primary diagnosis, congestive heart failure. Stage 4. Secondary diagnosis, early onset dementia. Cognitive decline. I printed it out on official-looking watermarked paper I had saved. I crumpled the paper slightly to make it look handled. I put it in a manila folder along with the deed to the land. I walked back into the kitchen. Jasmine was watching me. Her eyes went wide. "Dad," she asked. I didn't answer immediately. I let the tremor in my hand shake the folder. I looked at her with a vacant expression. "Where is the train?" I mumbled. "The train is late." Jasmine covered her mouth. You look broken." Good, I said, straightening up for a brief second, because if I don't look broken, he won't get close enough for me to snap the trap. I grabbed an old cane from the umbrella stand. It had belonged to my grandfather. I leaned on it heavily. Let's go, Jasmine, I said. Get the truck. But drive slow. We don't want to be early. A victim is never early. A victim is always just on time to be slaughtered. As we walked out into the cold night air, I felt a strange sense of calm. I was walking into the lion's den. I was unarmed. I was outnumbered. But I had the one weapon Brandon Miller never bothered to check for. I had the element of surprise. He thought he was meeting a ghost. He was about to meet a nightmare. The show was about to begin. The Capitol Grill is a place where deals are made in the shadows of dimly lit booths. The air is thick with the smell of dry, aged beef leather upholstery and the metallic tang of money. When Jasmine and I walked in, the hostess looked at us as if we were health code violations. I was wearing the moth-eaten cardigan that smelled of camphor, my shoulders hunched forward, leaning heavily on the cane. I had rubbed a little more flour into my beard in the truck, making me look frail and unkempt. Jasmine walked beside me, her eyes downcast, clutching my arm as if she were afraid I would crumble into dust right there on the carpet. We were led to a circular booth in the back. Brandon and Patricia were already there. They looked like royalty holding court. Patricia was wearing a black dress with a diamond necklace that caught the candlelight. Brandon was nursing a bourbon, his suit jacket unbuttoned to show off his silk tie. When they saw us approaching, the expressions on their faces were a masterclass in duality. To the other diners, they looked like concerned family members welcoming an elderly relative. But I saw the flash of disgust in Patricia's eyes when she looked at my stained sweater. I saw the greed in Brandon's eyes when he looked at the manila folder tucked under my arm. Walter Patricia cooed, standing up halfway but not actually moving to help me. You look terrible. I mean that with love. You look like you need rest. I sat down heavily, letting the cane clatter against the table. I mumbled something incoherent about the weather in 1982. Brandon exchanged a look with his mother. It was a look of triumph. They thought the lion was already dead. The waiter arrived. He was a young man with slicked back hair who clearly wanted to get away from my side of the table as fast as possible. We will start with the seafood tower, Patricia announced without looking at the menu. And a bottle of the Camus Cabernet, the $200 one. And for the entrees, I will have the filet Oscar. Brandon will have the ribeye. She looked at me and Jasmine. Just bring them some soup, she said to the waiter. Potato soup. Something soft. He has trouble chewing. I let my hand tremble as I reached for the water glass. I gripped it with shaking fingers, lifting it halfway to my mouth before letting it slip. The water splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. Oh, for God's sake, Patricia hissed, recoiling as if I had thrown acid at her. I am sorry, I stammered, my voice weak and raspy. The train shook. The tracks are uneven. Brandon rolled his eyes. He grabbed a napkin and threw it over the spill. It is okay, Walter. Just sit still. Don't touch anything. I shrank back into my seat, making myself small. I watched them eat. They tore into the seafood tower like vultures. They drank the expensive wine. They laughed about a vacation they were planning to the Amalfi Coast. They talked about remodeling the kitchen in my apartment. They did it all right in front of me, treating me like a piece of furniture that had simply expired. Once the plates were cleared, Brandon wasted no time. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and leaned across the table. His demeanor shifted from dismissive to predatory. Walter, he said, keeping his voice low and serious. We need to talk about the future. Jasmine tells me you are worried about the suburban estate, the 5 acres. I blinked at him, letting my mouth hang open slightly. I squinted through the thick glasses. Is this the conductor? I asked Jasmine, pointing a shaking finger at Brandon. Jasmine played her part perfectly. She put her hand on mine. No, Dad, this is Brandon, your son-in-law. He is here to help you with the land. Remember, you wanted to make sure Leo gets it. Oh, I said, nodding slowly. Leo. Yes, my boy. The land is for the boy. Exactly, Brandon said, sliding a pen across the table. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen, and because Leo is a minor, he can't hold the title. You know that, Walter. The state will take it if you die without a trustee. You don't want the government to take Leo's inheritance, do you? No, I whispered, showing fear. Not the government. They took the rails. Right, Brandon said, playing along with my nonsense. So to protect Leo, you need to sign the land over to a trustee. Someone who knows business. Someone who can develop it and make it worth millions for Leo when he grows up. He opened a leather portfolio. Inside was a stack of legal documents. I recognized them immediately. They were standard quitclaim deeds and a power of attorney. He had prepared them quickly. He must have had a lawyer on retainer draft them the moment Jasmine called. "Just sign here," Walter Patricia said, tapping a long manicured fingernail on the signature line. "Right here at the X. Then you can go home and sleep. We will take care of everything." I leaned forward, adjusting my glasses. I stared at the paper. The letters were blurring not because my eyes were bad, but because I was calculating the angle of the trap. "I can't read it," I complained. "The letters are dancing. Is this the deed?" "Yes, it is the deed," Brandon said, his patience wearing thin. "Just sign it, old man. Do it for Leo." I picked up the pen. My hand shook violently. The tip of the pen hovered over the paper, making little ink blots. I need to know it is safe," I mumbled. I looked up at Brandon. My eyes were watery. "I need the trustee to promise." "Promise what?" Brandon snapped. "Promise to take the debt too," I said softly. "What?" Patricia asked, sharply. "The land," I said, raising my voice, slightly sounding agitated. "The land has the heavy burden, the taxes, the maintenance. If I give it to you, you have to take the burden. You have to sign that you accept the full responsibility of the trust." Brandon laughed. He looked at Patricia. "He is talking about property taxes, Mom. He thinks a few $1,000s in taxes is a burden." "Of course," Walter Brandon said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I will take the burden. I have plenty of money to pay the taxes. I will take care of everything." "Then you sign first," I said. I pushed the papers away. I pulled out the document I had brought in my folder. It was tucked under the fake medical report. It looked identical to his papers. Same font, same layout. But the content was very different. Rachel had drafted it at 5 a.m. It was a certificate of acceptance of fiduciary liability. It stated that the undersigned acknowledges full personal liability for all existing debts, liens, and encumbrances attached to the Hayes family trust, and agrees to indemnify the grantor against all claims. Brandon didn't read it. Why would he? He thought he was dealing with a senile old man and a submissive wife. He thought he was winning a multi-million-dollar property. He saw the words acceptance of trust and assumed it was his ticket to the jackpot. "Sign it," I said, pushing the paper toward him. "Show me you are the man of the house." Brandon grabbed the pen from my shaking hand. He didn't even hesitate. He scrawled his signature across the bottom of the page with a flourish. He pressed down hard, leaving an imprint on the table. "There," he said, shoving the paper back to me. I signed it. "I am the trustee now. I own the responsibility. Now sign the deed." I watched him sign. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He had just voluntarily assumed personal liability for the debts of a trust that I had deliberately loaded with toxic assets years ago as a shield against lawsuits. He didn't know it yet, but he had just signed away his future to pay for my past. I took the paper he signed. I folded it slowly and put it in my pocket. "Okay," I said. "Now I can sign." I picked up the pen again. I lowered it to his deed. Brandon leaned in, holding his breath. Patricia leaned in, her eyes wide with anticipation. They were so close to the kill. The pen touched the paper. Then I stopped. I dropped the pen. It clattered onto the china plate. I need to use the restroom," I said. "My bladder. It is the medication." Brandon slammed his hand on the table. "Are you kidding me? Just sign the damn paper, Walter." "You can pee in a minute." "I can't," I whined, clutching my stomach. "It is coming now, please. I don't want to have an accident in the nice restaurant." Patricia looked at me with pure revulsion. "Let him go, Brandon." "God, it is disgusting. If he wets himself here, I will vomit. Go, Walter. Go." "But hurry back." I stood up, leaning on the cane. I shuffled away from the table, dragging my left foot. I moved slowly until I reached the corner of the dining room. I turned the corner toward the restrooms. As soon as I was out of their line of sight, the shuffle stopped. I straightened my back. I cracked my neck. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of victory. I walked into the restroom. It was empty. I locked the main door behind me. I walked to the sink and turned on the cold water. I splashed it on my face, washing away the flour from my beard. I took the glasses off and put in my contact lenses. I took the moth-eaten cardigan off and stuffed it into the trash can. Underneath, I was wearing a crisp white button-down shirt. I rolled up the sleeves, revealing my forearms. I looked in the mirror. The old, confused man was gone. Walter Hayes was back, and he was ready to deliver the check. I took the document Brandon had signed out of my pocket. I checked the signature one last time. It was valid. It was binding. I unlocked the bathroom door. I didn't pick up the cane. I didn't limp. I marched out of that restroom with the stride of a man who had driven steel spikes into the earth for 40 years. I walked back toward the table, but I didn't sit down. I stopped right behind Brandon. Rachel walked in through the front door at that exact moment, flanked by 2 uniformed officers from the Economic Crimes Unit. The dinner was over. The reckoning had begun. I walked out of that bathroom, leaving the cane leaning against the sink. I did not need it. I never needed it. The shuffle was gone. The tremors were gone. The confused, watery look in my eyes was replaced by the cold, hard stare of a man who had spent 40 years staring down 50-ton locomotives. I rolled my shoulders back, feeling the fabric of my white shirt stretch across my chest. I felt strong. I felt dangerous. As I approached the table, I did not slow down. I walked with a heavy, rhythmic cadence. The sound of my boots on the parquet floor cut through the ambient noise of the restaurant like a hammer. Brandon was still holding the paper he had signed, a smirk plastered on his face as he poured another glass of wine. Patricia was busy checking her reflection in a silver spoon, oblivious to the storm that was about to make landfall. I stopped right behind Brandon. I did not sit down. I stood at my full height, casting a long shadow over their table. "I hope you enjoyed the wine, Brandon," I said. My voice was no longer the raspy whisper of a dying old man. It was a deep baritone, steady and commanding, "because it is the last thing you will ever taste on my dime." Brandon spun around in his chair so fast he almost knocked his glass over. He looked at me, then down at my legs, then back at my face. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a hook. "Walter," he stammered, "what happened to your... Where is your cane? I was just testing the structural integrity of your character," I interrupted. "And you failed. Catastrophically." Patricia dropped her spoon. She looked at me with a genuine fear. The man standing before her was not the easy mark she thought she had cornered. This was the man she had insulted. This was the man whose house she had stolen. "Who do you think you are talking to?" she hissed, trying to regain her composure. "Sit down, Walter. You are making a scene." "I am not sitting down, Patricia, but you might want to hold on to something, because the floor is about to drop out from under you." At that moment, the front door of the restaurant opened. Rachel walked in. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that looked like armor. She carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a stack of files in the other. She walked straight to our table, her heels clicking in perfect unison with my heartbeat. She did not look at Brandon or Patricia. She looked at me and nodded. "Is it done?" she asked. "He signed it," I said, pointing to the paper in Brandon's hand. Rachel smiled. It was a shark smile. Brandon looked between us, panic starting to set in. "Who is this? What is going on?" "Walter, why are you acting like this? Allow me to introduce you," I said. "This is Rachel King. She is the finest real estate attorney in Chicago, and she is here to explain exactly what you just did to yourself." I pulled the chair out from the empty side of the table and sat down, not huddled over. I leaned back, crossing my arms. "You see, Brandon?" I began, keeping my eyes locked on his. "You made a fundamental error. You assumed that because I work with my hands, I do not use my head. You assumed that a black man from the South Side who drives a truck could not possibly understand the complexities of trust law. That was arrogant, and arrogance is an expensive luxury." I reached out and plucked the paper from his hand. He was gripping it so tight the paper tore slightly. "You thought you were signing a deed of acceptance for 5 acres of land," I said, smoothing the paper out on the table. "But if you had bothered to read the fine print, or if you had bothered to treat me with enough respect to actually check the document, you would have seen that this is not a deed. This is a certificate of assumption of liability." "Liability," Brandon squeaked. His face was turning a pale shade of gray. Rachel stepped forward. She placed a thick document on the table. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice crisp and professional, "the Hayes family trust, which you were so eager to take control of, is an irrevocable trust. That means the assets within it cannot be moved or sold without the express written consent of the beneficiary, who is Jasmine Hayes. Walter Hayes is the trustee. He does not own the assets. He manages them, but he signed it over." Brandon shouted, pointing at me. "He said he wanted me to be the trustee." Walter nodded. I said, "I did want you to be the trustee, because the trust does not just hold land, it holds debt. I leaned in closer. You see, Brandon, that land in the suburbs. It is protected by a conservation easement. It cannot be developed. It cannot be sold for commercial use. It is essentially a nature preserve. It generates zero revenue. However, it does generate significant tax obligations and maintenance fees. But that is not the best part. I paused, letting the silence stretch. The best part is that by signing this document, you just voluntarily accepted personal responsibility for all outstanding liens against the trust. You just agreed to indemnify me against any and all claims. And since you are so fond of gambling, let me tell you what the stakes are. Rachel opened another folder. We have evidence that you forged a quitclaim deed to transfer the Millennium Tower apartment, she said. You sold a $600,000 property to your own LLC for $10. That is not just fraud. That is grand larceny. That is money laundering. And because you used the internet to file the deed, it is also wire fraud. That is a federal crime, Brandon. Brandon looked like he was going to be sick. He looked at Patricia. Mom, do something. He is lying. Patricia stood up, her face red with rage. This is entrapment. You tricked him. He is an old man. He doesn't know what he is saying. We will sue you. We will take everything. Sit down, Patricia, I roared. The entire restaurant went silent. Forks froze in midair. Every eye in the room was on us. I am not finished, I said, lowering my voice to a deadly whisper. You want to sue me? Go ahead. But before you call your lawyer, you might want to listen to this. I took out my phone, the new burner phone. I placed it in the center of the table right next to the candle. I pressed play. The audio was crystal clear. It was the recording from under the buffet table at their party. Patricia's voice filled the air sharp and cruel. He is a laborer, a railroad worker. Can you imagine a man like that living in a building like this? He probably didn't even know how to use the bidet. We had to hire a professional cleaning crew to sanitize the whole unit just to get the ghetto smell out. Then Brandon's voice. My ex-wife's father. He bought it years ago, but well, let's just say he wasn't exactly sophisticated enough to manage an asset like this. He got in over his head. Then Patricia again. The judge will look at us, and then he will look at that angry black man, and he will make the comfortable choice. The system was built for us, honey. Use it. I let the recording play until the end. I watched the color drain from Patricia's face. I watched the people at the nearby tables look at her with absolute disgust. The mask of the sophisticated, wealthy matriarch had slipped, revealing the ugly, racist bigot underneath. I turned off the phone. The system was built for you, was it? I asked quietly. Well, I built systems for 40 years. I built tracks that carry millions of tons of steel across this country. I know how to build things that last, and I know how to dismantle things that are broken. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. Rachel placed a document on top of the recorder. This is an eviction notice, she said. It is effective immediately. Since the deed transfer was fraudulent, legal ownership has reverted to the trust. You are trespassing. I looked at my watch. It was a sturdy, reliable chronograph. You have 60 minutes, I said. What? Brandon whispered. You have 60 minutes to get out of my house, I said. Not 61. 60. If you are still there at 9:30, the police officers waiting outside will escort you out in handcuffs. And they won't be the officers you called Brandon. These are from the Economic Crimes Unit. They are very interested in your crypto wallets. But my clothes, Patricia stammered. My jewelry. You can take what you can carry, I said, cold. Everything else stays as collateral for the money you stole from my grandson's education fund. You can't do this, Brandon cried. I have nowhere to go. You have a van, I said. The one you made my daughter sleep in. It is parked around the back. I rented it for another day. It is cold, Brandon. But I am sure you can use your sophisticated business mind to figure out how to stay warm. I turned to Jasmine. She was looking at me with tears in her eyes, but they were tears of pride this time. She stood up and took my arm. Let's go, Dad, she said. We walked away from the table. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could hear the sound of their world collapsing behind me. I could hear Brandon sobbing. I could hear Patricia frantically dialing her phone. As we reached the door, the waiter, the young man who had looked at me with disdain earlier, held it open for us. He looked at me with a newfound respect. Have a good night, sir, he said. I looked at him. I looked at the city lights reflecting on the pavement. It is a good night, son, I said. It is the best night I have had in a long time. We stepped out into the cool air. The wind was blowing, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt the heat of the fire I had just lit, and I knew that by the time the sun came up tomorrow, the ashes of their arrogance would be all that was left. The wind outside the restaurant felt different now. It was no longer the biting chill of a Chicago winter that cuts through to your bones. It was the refreshing breeze of a storm that had finally broken the humidity. I watched from the curb as Brandon and Patricia stumbled toward the valet stand. They looked like two people who had just survived a plane crash only to realize they were stranded in the middle of the ocean. Brandon was clutching his chest, hyperventilating, while Patricia was frantically typing on her phone. But the signal was not going through to her lawyers. The signal that was coming through was much worse. It started with a vibration. I could see Brandon's phone lighting up in his hand. It was not a call. It was a notification, then another, then a cascade of them. It looked like a slot machine that had hit the jackpot, but instead of coins, it was dispensing disaster. Brandon stared at the screen, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light. I knew exactly what he was seeing, because Rachel had timed it perfectly. The moment I walked out of that bathroom, she had hit the execute button on the forensic freeze order. First came the email from Chase Bank, account frozen due to suspicious activity reported by the Federal Trade Commission. Then the alert from American Express, credit line suspended. Then the notification from his crypto exchange, wallet locked pending investigation into money laundering. Brandon let out a sound that was half sob and half scream. He tried to unlock his phone to make a call, but his fingers were shaking so badly he dropped it on the pavement. He scrambled to pick it up, cracking the screen. He dialed a number. I knew who he was calling. He was not calling the bank. He was calling the private lender, the loan shark he owed $50,000 to. He needed to tell them it was a mistake. He needed to buy time. I watched him put the phone to his ear. I could see him shouting, but no sound was coming out of his throat. Then I saw him pull the phone away and stare at it in horror. "What happened?" Patricia shrieked, grabbing his arm. "Who is it?" They hung up. Brandon whispered. His voice carried over the wind. They sent a text. "What does it say?" she demanded. "It says time is up," Brandon said. He looked at me then. He looked across the 20 feet of pavement separating us, and I saw the realization hit him. The bank could be fought in court. The IRS could be negotiated with. But the people he borrowed money from to gamble on digital coins, they did not negotiate. And now, thanks to the public freeze on his assets, they knew he was broke. They knew he was exposed. Patricia snatched the phone from his hand. She looked at the text. She looked at the bank alerts. For a second, I thought she might faint. But Patricia is a survivor. Her survival instinct is not flight, it is destruction. She realized something that Brandon was too panicked to see. The cold wallet, she hissed. The hardware drive. It is in the safe. Brandon's eyes went wide. The evidence, he gasped. "If the police get that drive, we go to prison for 20 years, Patricia screamed. "We have to get to the apartment. We have to flush it." Now they didn't wait for the valet to bring their car. They ran. They ran past the confused attendant who was holding the keys to their leased Mercedes. Brandon snatched the keys from the boy's hand and shoved him aside. They jumped into the car. Tires screeched as Brandon slammed on the gas, peeling out of the parking lot and narrowly missing a taxi. I watched their taillights disappear around the corner. Jasmine squeezed my hand. "Dad," she said softly, "they're going back to the apartment." "I know," I said. "Should we follow them?" "No," I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my new phone. "We don't need to chase them. You can't outrun a wall, and I just built a very high wall around that building." I called Rachel. She picked up on the first ring. "They are running," I said. "Good," Rachel replied. "The Economic Crimes Unit is 5 minutes out. They are coordinating with the patrol units. But Walter, if they get into that apartment, they might destroy the physical evidence before the officers can execute the warrant. That cold wallet is the only proof we have of where the money went." "They won't get in," I said. "How can you be sure?" Rachel asked. "They still have the physical keys." "Because I am an engineer, Rachel. I don't rely on keys. I rely on systems, and I just rebooted the system." I hung up and looked at Jasmine. "Let's go," I said. "I want to be there when they hit the wall." We drove to the Millennium Tower. I did not speed. I drove the speed limit. I stopped at every red light. I wanted to give them time. I wanted them to have hope. I wanted them to reach the door of the apartment breathless and terrified, thinking they had made it, thinking they could wipe the drive and spin a story. The fall is always harder when you think you have reached the summit. By the time we pulled up across the street from the building, I could see the Mercedes parked haphazardly in the fire lane. The driver's door was open. They hadn't even bothered to close it. They had abandoned the vehicle and sprinted inside. I sat in my truck and watched the lobby through the glass walls. I couldn't see the elevators from here, but I could imagine the scene. I closed my eyes and pictured it. I pictured Brandon and Patricia in the elevator, the agonizingly slow climb to the 42nd floor, Brandon sweating through his shirt, Patricia gripping her purse, her knuckles white. They would be planning their moves: grab the safe, drill it open, smash the drive with a hammer, flush the pieces down the toilet. It was a solid plan. It was the only plan they had left. The elevator would ding. The doors would slide open. They would run down the hallway. They would reach Unit 42B. Brandon would jam his key into the lock. He would turn it, and nothing would happen. I opened my eyes. I looked at the building. 2 days ago, while everyone was sleeping, I had accessed the building's central security server using the override codes I kept from the construction days. I hadn't just changed the digital keypad code. I had engaged the deadlock protocol. It is a safety feature designed for lockdowns. When engaged, magnetic bolts drop into the door frame from the top and bottom. The physical key will turn the cylinder, but the door will not open. It is a sealed vault. I checked the time. 9:20 p.m., right on schedule. I got out of the truck and walked toward the entrance, Jasmine following close behind. As we got closer, I could see movement in the lobby. The concierge Marcus was standing by the elevators, looking up at the ceiling with a worried expression. I pushed through the revolving doors. Marcus saw me. He didn't look scared this time. He looked relieved. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "they are upstairs. They are screaming. They are pounding on the door." "Let them pound," I said. "It is solid oak reinforced with a steel core. They could hit it with a battering ram and it wouldn't budge." We stood there in the lobby and listened. Even from 42 floors down, I could hear the faint, dull thuds of bodies throwing themselves against wood. It was the sound of desperation. It was the sound of rats realizing the ship had already sunk. Then came the other sound. It started as a low wail in the distance, bouncing off the skyscrapers of downtown Chicago. Then it grew louder, sharper, more urgent. The sirens. Blue and red lights began to reflect off the glass walls of the lobby, painting the marble floor in a chaotic disco of authority. One cruiser pulled up, then another, then an unmarked black SUV. Doors flew open, officers poured out. These were not the beat cops who had humiliated me 2 nights ago. These men and women wore jackets that said Federal Task Force. They carried equipment. They carried warrants. Rachel stepped out of the black SUV. She walked over to the lead agent, a stern-looking man with gray hair. She pointed at me, then she pointed up. The agent walked over to me. "Mr. Hayes," he asked. "That is me," I said. "I am Agent Miller." "No relation," he added dryly. "We have a warrant for the arrest of Brandon Miller and Patricia Miller for wire fraud, money laundering, and grand theft. We also have a search warrant for the premises. Do you have the access codes?" I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small piece of paper. I had written the override code on it. "This will disengage the magnetic locks," I said. "But agent, be careful. They are desperate, and they are cornered." The agent took the paper. He nodded. He turned to his team. "Stack up," he commanded. "We are going up." I watched them crowd into the elevator. The doors closed. The numbers started to climb. 20. I looked at Jasmine. She was trembling, but she wasn't crying. She was watching the numbers too. "Do you want to go up?" I asked. "No," she said. "I don't want to see them. I just want it to be over." "It is over, baby girl," I said. But it wasn't quite over. We heard it before we saw it. The sound of the elevator doors opening on the 42nd floor. And then the screaming. It wasn't the screaming of anger anymore. It was the high-pitched, hysterical screaming of a woman who realizes her life of privilege has just ended. "No, you can't. This is my house. Get your hands off me." Then Brandon's voice. "I didn't do it." It was her idea. She made me sign it. I shook my head. Even at the end, he was a coward. He would sell out his own mother to save himself. 10 minutes later, the elevator doors in the lobby opened again. The procession that walked out was very different from the one that had walked into the restaurant. Brandon was in handcuffs, weeping openly, his expensive suit rumpled and stained with sweat. Patricia was handcuffed behind her back, her makeup smeared, kicking at the officers who were dragging her. When they saw me standing there, they stopped. Patricia screamed. Her eyes were wild. Tell them Tell them it was a misunderstanding. We are family. You can't let them take me to jail. I am an old woman." I stepped forward. I looked her in the eye. "You are not family." "Patricia," I said, "family protects. Family builds. You are a demolition crew. And you just brought the roof down on your own heads." "And Brandon," I asked, looking at the man who had tormented my daughter. He couldn't even look at me. He was staring at the floor, sobbing. "Don't worry about the cold wallet," I said to him. "The police will find the code. And even if they don't, the blockchain never forgets. Just like I never forgot." "Officer," I said to the agent, "get this trash out of my lobby." The agents pushed them through the revolving doors. I watched them get shoved into the back of the cruisers. I watched the heavy doors slam shut. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Better than the click of a safe. Better than the hum of a train engine. It was the sound of justice. The sirens wailed again as the convoy pulled away, taking the toxicity out of our lives forever. The lobby fell silent. Marcus looked at me and smiled. "Welcome home, Mr. Hayes," he said. I put my arm around my daughter. "Let's go upstairs, Jasmine," I said. "We have a lot of cleaning up to do." And I promised Leo a fire truck. The elevator ride up to the 42nd floor was silent, but the air was thick with adrenaline. I stood in the back corner of the car watching the numbers climb on the display while Agent Miller and his team checked their weapons. These were not the beat cops who had pushed me around 2 nights ago. These were federal agents from the Economic Crimes Unit, and they moved with a terrifying precision. They wore heavy tactical vests with the letters FBI and IRS printed in yellow across their backs. They were the hammer that was about to shatter the glass house Brandon and Patricia had built. When the elevator doors slid open, the hallway was filled with the sound of screaming. Patricia was inside the apartment yelling through the door at someone on the phone while Brandon was banging on the metal frame trying to get out. They were trapped. The magnetic locks I had engaged remotely were holding firm. It was a prison of their own making. Agent Miller signaled to his team. He did not knock. He did not ask nicely. He turned to me and nodded. I punched the override code into the keypad on the wall, but the door was bolted from the inside with a physical deadbolt. That was fine. Agent Miller had a tool for that. Federal Agent Miller shouted, his voice booming down the corridor. "Open the door or we will breach." There was a sudden silence from inside, then the sound of frantic footsteps running away from the door. "Breach," Miller commanded. 2 agents swung a heavy battering ram. The sound of metal hitting wood was deafening like a gunshot in a library. The expensive mahogany door splintered around the frame. 1 hit, 2 hits. On the 3rd hit, the lock gave way and the door swung open, crashing against the wall. The team poured into the apartment like a flood. I stayed in the hallway for a moment watching the chaos unfold. It was a beautiful kind of chaos. Patricia was standing in the middle of the living room, clutching a Louis Vuitton bag to her chest, screaming, "Get out! Get out! Do you know who I am? This is private property." Agent Miller did not care who she was. He walked straight up to her. "Ma'am, put the bag down and step away from the furniture." "I will not," Patricia shrieked. "You have no right." 2 agents grabbed her arms. She struggled, kicking and spitting, but they were professionals. They spun her around and zip-tied her hands behind her back. They sat her down roughly on the velvet sofa she had bought with my money. She looked small now. Her hair was messy, her face was red, and the arrogance that usually armored her was stripped away, leaving only fear. Brandon was found in the kitchen. He was trying to shove something into the garbage disposal. An agent tackled him before he could flip the switch. They dragged him into the living room and threw him onto the rug next to his mother. He was weeping. Not crying, but weeping like a child who has scraped his knee. "Secure the premises," Miller shouted. "No one leaves. No one touches anything." I walked into the apartment then. My heavy boots crunched on the splinters of the door frame. I walked past the agents who were tearing the place apart. They were pulling books off the shelves. They were emptying drawers. They were looking for the digital breadcrumbs of a crime. Patricia looked up and saw me. Her eyes went wide. "Walter," she gasped. "Tell them to stop. Tell them. This is a mistake. We are family." I looked at her. I looked at the zip ties cutting into her wrists. "I tried to tell you, Patricia," I said. "I told you that you were standing on a trap door. You just didn't listen. Search the office," Miller ordered. I followed them to the study. This used to be my sanctuary. Now it smelled of Brandon's cheap cologne and cigar smoke. The agents went straight for the wall safe behind the painting. It was the same safe I used to keep my deeds in. "Do we have the combination?" an agent asked. I stepped forward. Left to 32, right to 8, left to 19. The agent spun the dial. The mechanism clicked. The heavy steel door swung open. Inside it was packed. There were stacks of cash wrapped in rubber bands. There were watches. But right in the center, sitting on a velvet tray, was a small black device that looked like a USB drive. The cold wallet. Agent Miller picked it up with a gloved hand. He held it up to the light. "Bingo," he said. "This is the ledger I asked." "This is everything," Miller said, smiling. "This is the offline storage for his crypto accounts. If the money was laundered, it went through here. And look at this." He reached into the back of the safe and pulled out a thick leather binder. He opened it. Inside were contracts, but they were not bank contracts. They were handwritten agreements on rough paper signed in shaky ink. "Loan shark notes," Miller said, whistling low. "High interest. Collateralized by assets he didn't own. He borrowed $50,000 from the cartel against this apartment before he even legally stole it from you. This guy was playing Russian roulette with a fully loaded gun." I looked at the binder. I saw the names on the contracts. I saw the interest rates, 50% a week. Brandon hadn't just stolen my money. He had sold his soul to people who break legs for a living. "Take it all," Miller ordered. "Bag and tag every single piece of paper." I walked back out to the living room. The agents were bringing the evidence out in clear plastic bags. Brandon saw the black USB drive in Agent Miller's hand, and he let out a moan of pure despair. He slumped forward, burying his face in the carpet. "It is over," he sobbed into the rug. "It is all over." Patricia was staring at the wall. She was mumbling to herself. Something about lawyers. Something about suing the government. She was in shock. Her brain couldn't process that the world where she always won had just ceased to exist. I walked to the kitchen. It was a mess. The agents had emptied the cabinets looking for hidden cash. But the coffee machine was still there. It was a fancy Italian espresso maker I had bought for Jasmine. I filled the tank with water. I put a fresh pod in. I pressed the button. The machine whirred to life. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air, mixing with the smell of fear and sweat. I found a mug in the drying rack. It was my mug. The one Jasmine had given me for Father's Day 5 years ago. It said "World's Best Grandpa" on it. Brandon had tried to throw it away, but Jasmine must have saved it. I poured the coffee. I took a sip. It was hot. It was strong. It tasted like victory. I walked back into the living room holding the mug. I stood over Patricia and Brandon. I didn't yell. I didn't rage. I just took another sip of my coffee and looked at them. "You know," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I sat in this exact spot a week ago, and you told me I wasn't sophisticated enough for this apartment. You told me I smelled like labor." Patricia looked up at me. Her eyes were filled with hate, but she didn't say a word. "Well," I continued, "it turns out you were right about one thing. I am a laborer. I work hard. I build things. And when I find rot in the foundation, I cut it out." I took another sip. "I hope you like the new accommodations," I said. "I hear the federal penitentiary doesn't have a view of the lake. But don't worry. You will have plenty of time to think about sophisticated investment strategies." Agent Miller walked over. "Mr. Hayes," he said, "we have secured the evidence. We are taking them into custody now. Do you want us to clear the scene?" "No," I said. "Take your time, Agent. I am just going to finish my coffee." 2 agents hauled Brandon to his feet. He couldn't even stand. His legs were jelly. They had to drag him toward the door. As he passed me, he looked at me with pleading eyes. "Walter, please," he begged. "I am Leo's father." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had stolen my grandson's future to pay for his gambling addiction. "No," I said coldly. "You were just a donor. Leo has a father. He is the man who is going to raise him to be nothing like you." They dragged him out. Then it was Patricia's turn. She stood up with as much dignity as she could muster with her hands tied behind her back. She looked at the wrecked apartment. She looked at the broken door. Then she looked at me. "You haven't won," she spat. "You will never be one of us." I smiled. A slow, genuine smile. "Thank God for that, Patricia," I said. "Thank God for that." They marched her out into the hallway. I heard the elevator ding. I heard the doors close. and then there was silence. I stood alone in the ruin of the living room. The wind was blowing through the open balcony door, fluttering the curtains. I walked over and closed it. I locked it. I looked around. The apartment was a mess, but for the first time in months it felt clean. The stain was gone, the parasites were gone. I sat down on the sofa. I put my feet up on the coffee table, something Patricia never allowed anyone to do. I drank my coffee. I listened to the quiet. My phone buzzed. It was Jasmine. "Are they gone?" she texted. "Yes," I typed back. "They are gone. Come home, baby girl. It is safe now." I put the phone down. I closed my eyes. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 40 years. The war was over. The bad guys lost. And the old man in the dirty work clothes was the last one standing. The elevator ride down to the lobby was the longest minute of Patricia Miller's life, but it was not silent. She spent every second of it cursing the federal agents and demanding to speak to a manager as if the FBI were a restaurant that had messed up her order. When the doors finally slid open on the ground floor, the lobby was not empty. News travels fast in a building like the Millennium Tower. Residents were lingering by the mailboxes, pretending to check their post. People were standing outside the glass doors watching the flashing lights. A small crowd had gathered, and for a narcissist like Patricia, a crowd is not an audience. It is a weapon. As the agents tried to escort her across the marble floor toward the revolving doors, Patricia made her move. She went limp. It is a tactic toddlers use in supermarkets, but seeing a 58-year-old woman in a Chanel dress do it was shocking. She dropped to her knees, dragging the agents down with her. Then she started to scream. "Help me. Please, someone, help me. These men are hurting me." The agents were professionals. They didn't panic. They tried to lift her up, but she was dead weight. She thrashed and kicked, knocking over a potted palm tree. The ceramic pot shattered loud as a gunshot echoing through the cavernous space. The crowd outside pressed their faces against the glass. The residents inside pulled out their phones. That was what she wanted. The phones, the cameras, the court of public opinion. He paid them off. Patricia shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me as I stepped out of the elevator behind her. That man attacked me. He is a stalker. He broke into my home, and now he has bribed the police. I am a victim of hate. Look at what they are doing to a defenseless woman. She managed to twist her body around so that her handcuffed hands were hidden beneath her back, making it look like she was being restrained unlawfully. She looked straight into the camera of a young woman who was filming. "My name is Patricia Miller. I am a resident here. This man is Walter Hayes. He has been harassing my family for months. He is using his connections to destroy us because we are white. Please live stream this. Please tell the world." The crowd murmured. People love a victim. And Patricia knew exactly how to play the role. She squeezed out tears. She made her voice tremble. She was painting a picture of a corrupt system targeting an innocent grandmother. For a moment, I saw doubt in the eyes of the neighbors. They looked at the federal agents in their tactical gear. They looked at me standing there with my arms crossed. They looked at the white woman sobbing on the floor. The narrative was shifting. She was winning the sympathy vote. I stood by the concierge desk watching her performance. It was impressive. It was Oscar-worthy. She was banking on the fact that people believe the loudest voice in the room. She was banking on the fact that people see a crying woman and assume she is telling the truth. She thought she could shame the police into letting her go, or at least create enough chaos to delay the arrest. She looked at me through her tear-stained lashes, and I saw a flicker of a smile, a tiny triumphant smirk that said, "I can still burn you down." I looked at Marcus the concierge. He was standing behind the high marble counter, his hand hovering over the control panel for the building's media system. Above the reception desk was a massive LED screen. Usually it displayed weather updates or advertisements for luxury cars. Tonight, it was about to display something much more educational. Marcus looked at me. His eyes asked a question. "Are you sure?" I nodded. One sharp, decisive nod. Marcus pressed the button. The giant screen flickered. The image of a sunny beach advertisement vanished. The screen went black for a second. The lobby went silent except for Patricia's sobbing wails. Then the audio kicked in. It wasn't a whisper. It was amplified through the lobby's surround sound speakers. The quality was crystal clear. "He is a laborer, a railroad worker. Can you imagine a man like that living in a building like this?" Patricia stopped screaming. Her head snapped up. She looked at the screen. The video feed from the hidden camera in the fern appeared. It was grainy, but the faces were unmistakable. There was Patricia standing in her penthouse holding a glass of wine. There was Brandon laughing beside her. The timestamp in the corner showed the date. 2 nights ago. The voice on the screen continued booming through the lobby. He probably didn't even know how to use the bidet. The place smelled of fried grease and cheap cologne when we got the keys. We had to hire a professional cleaning crew to sanitize the whole unit just to get the ghetto smell out. The crowd in the lobby gasped. The people filming on their phones didn't lower them, but the angle changed. They weren't filming a victim anymore. They were filming a monster. Patricia scrambled to her feet. The act of the helpless old woman vanished instantly. "Turn it off," she screamed at Marcus. "Turn that off right now. I will sue you. I will have your job." But the video continued. It cut to the part where Brandon expressed concern about the fraud. He says they know about the crypto mom. He says they traced the wire transfer. And then Patricia's response. The nail in her coffin. So what if they traced it? You are the custodian. We will just say it was a high-risk investment strategy that failed. It is not illegal to be bad at business, Brandon. It is only illegal to get caught stealing. As long as you stick to the story that Jasmine was incompetent and I had to intervene, we are fine. The audio filled every corner of the room. It bounced off the marble floors and the glass walls. It stripped her naked in front of the very people she was trying to manipulate. The neighbors who had looked at her with pity 10 seconds ago were now looking at her with revulsion. The young woman who was live streaming stepped closer, zooming in on Patricia's face. The judge will look at us, and then he will look at that angry black man, and he will make the comfortable choice. The system was built for us, honey. Use it. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a judgment passed. Patricia stood in the center of the lobby. Her chest was heaving. She looked around, desperate to find an ally. She looked at the woman with the phone. "That is fake," she yelled. "That is a deep fake. He made it with AI. You can't believe that." But nobody moved. Nobody stepped forward to help her. The neighbors turned their backs. One by one, they turned away, refusing to give her the attention she craved. The young woman with the phone lowered it and shook her head. "You are disgusting," the woman said. Patricia flinched as if she had been slapped. Agent Miller stepped forward. He didn't need to use force anymore. The fight had gone out of her. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet, "you have the right to remain silent, and I highly suggest you start using it because you are digging your grave deeper with every word." He took her arm. This time she didn't resist. She didn't drop to the floor. She couldn't. The floor was no longer a stage. It was just the ground beneath her feet, and it was crumbling. They walked her toward the doors. The crowd outside parted like the Red Sea, not out of respect but to avoid touching her. I watched her pass. She tried to hide her face against her shoulder to shield herself from the cameras, but it was too late. The internet had seen her. The world had heard her. The mask of the respectable, wealthy woman was gone, and all that was left was a thief who hated people for the color of their skin. Brandon was already in the car, his head bowed in shame. They shoved Patricia into the back seat beside him. She looked out the window one last time. Her eyes met mine. There was no anger left in them. Only a hollow, terrifying realization that she had lost everything. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just stood there, tall and still. Marcus turned off the screen. The advertisement for the beach returned, promising a paradise that Patricia Miller would never see again. I walked over to the desk. "Thank you, Marcus," I said. Marcus didn't say anything. He just reached out and shook my hand. His grip was firm. It was the handshake of one man acknowledging another man's dignity. I turned and walked to the elevator. Jasmine was waiting for me upstairs. The show was over. The audience had gone home. And for the first time in a long time, the air in the building felt clean. 3 days after the arrest, Brandon Miller managed to make bail. He had a wealthy college friend who put up the money thinking Brandon was just a victim of a misunderstanding. It was the last favor Brandon would ever receive, and it was the worst thing that could have happened to him. The federal agents were satisfied to let him walk out of the detention center because they knew something Brandon did not. They knew that the moment he stepped onto the street, he was no longer their problem. He was a liability to the people who lend money in the dark. I was sitting on my porch watching the sunset when I saw him. He did not drive up in a Mercedes. He did not walk with the swagger of a private equity manager. He dragged himself down the sidewalk, limping heavily on his left leg. His suit was gone. He was wearing dirty sweatpants and a torn hoodie. One of his eyes was swollen shut and there was dried blood on his chin. He looked like a stray dog that had been kicked one too many times. He stopped at the edge of my driveway, looking up at the house he had once called a hovel. He looked at the warm yellow light spilling from the windows. He looked at the peace he had tried to destroy. He collapsed on the bottom step of my porch. He didn't knock. He just sat there shivering. I stood up and walked to the screen door. I didn't open it. I just looked down at him. "Help me," he croaked. His voice was broken. "They found me, Walter. They were waiting outside the jail. They said this was just a warning. They said I have 24 hours to get the money, or they will take a finger for every 1,000 I owe." I looked at his hands. They were trembling. These were the hands that had signed the fake deed. These were the hands that had locked my daughter out in the snow. "You should have stayed in jail, Brandon," I said through the mesh. "It is the only place you are safe." "I can't go back," he sobbed. "I need money, Walter. Please. You have money. You have the land. Just sell a piece of it. I will pay you back. I swear. I will sign anything." I shook my head. "You still don't get it, do you? You think this is a transaction. You think you can negotiate with gravity after you have already jumped off the cliff." "Jasmine," he screamed, suddenly lunging toward the door. "Jasmine, please, I know you are in there. I am hurt. They are going to kill me." The door opened. I stepped back. Jasmine stepped out. She was wearing a simple sweater and jeans. She had her hair pulled back. She looked rested. She looked strong. She looked at the man curled up on her porch, and for a moment I thought she might waver. I thought the old Jasmine, the one who wanted to please everyone, might surface. Brandon saw her and his eyes lit up with a desperate hope. "Jazzy," he whimpered, using her old nickname. "Look at me. Look what they did to me. You have to help me. We are family. I am Leo's dad. You can't let them kill Leo's dad." He reached out a bloody hand to grab the hem of her jeans. Jasmine didn't move away, but she didn't reach down. She looked at his hand like it was a dead leaf blowing across the concrete. "You died 3 days ago, Brandon," she said. Her voice was not angry. It was flat. It was the voice of a coroner pronouncing a time of death. "What are you talking about?" he cried. "I am right here. I am alive." "No," she said. "The man I married died the night he put his son in a freezing van to protect his crypto wallet. The man I loved died when he let his mother call me a slur and laughed about it. You are not Brandon. You are just a stranger who owes a lot of money to bad people. But I did it for us," he pleaded. "I wanted to give us a better life. I took a risk. It is what men do. I made a mistake, Jasmine. Everyone makes mistakes. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill," Jasmine said. "A mistake is burning toast. Systematically gaslighting your wife, stealing your son's education fund, and forging my father's signature is not a mistake. It is a choice. You chose money over us every single time. And now the money is gone, and we are gone too." She looked him in the eye. "I am filing for sole custody," she said. "The judge has already seen the evidence. You will never see Leo again. I will tell him his father went away on a long trip. I will tell him his father was sick. I will be kind in my lies, Brandon, which is more than you ever were in your truths." Brandon slumped against the railing. The fight went out of him. He realized that the emotional manipulation, the tool he had used to control her for years, was broken. The battery was dead. "You are heartless," he whispered. "I learned from the best," she said. She turned around and walked back inside. She didn't look back. She closed the heavy oak door and I heard the lock click. It was a solid sound, a permanent sound. I was left alone with him on the porch. The night air was getting colder. I could smell the fear on him. It smelled sour and metallic. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my wallet. Brandon watched me, his eyes hungry. He thought I was going to give him thousands. He thought I was going to save him. I pulled out a $20 bill and a single bus token. I dropped them on his lap. "What is this?" he asked, staring at the money. "This won't even buy me a meal." "It is a bus ticket," I said. "The station is 3 miles from here. The Greyhound to St. Louis leaves in an hour." "St. Louis?" he asked, confused. "Why would I go to St. Louis?" "You aren't going to St. Louis," I said. "You are going to the federal marshal's office in St. Louis. It is across state lines. The local loan sharks won't follow you there tonight. You are going to walk in there and you are going to revoke your bail. You are going to tell them you are a flight risk. You are going to beg them to put you in protective custody." He looked at me with horror. "You want me to go to prison? I want you to stay alive," I said. "Not for your sake, but because I don't want my grandson to have to visit a grave. I want him to know that his father is somewhere facing the consequences of his actions. Prison is a cage, Brandon, but it is also a fortress. The people you owe money to can't get to you in solitary confinement." I looked out at the street. A black sedan with tinted windows was driving slowly past the house. It slowed down as it passed my driveway. I saw the brake lights flare red. "You have about 5 minutes before that car comes back," I said. "If I were you, I would start running through the backyard, cut through the woods, get to the station." Brandon saw the car. He scrambled to his feet. He grabbed the $20 and the token. He didn't say thank you. He didn't apologize. He just looked at me with the eyes of a hunted animal, and then he ran. He ran around the side of the house, disappearing into the darkness of the trees. I watched the black sedan turn around at the end of the block and come back. It paused in front of my house. The window rolled down. A man looked out. He looked at the empty porch. He looked at me. I stared back. I didn't blink. I stood there under the porch light, a big man with nothing to hide and nothing to fear. The man in the car nodded slowly, then rolled up the window and drove away. I waited until the taillights disappeared. Then I turned off the porch light. I walked inside. Jasmine was in the kitchen hugging Leo. The house was warm. The coffee was brewing. "Is he gone?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "He is gone." I sat down at the table. I picked up the newspaper. Life goes on. The tracks are clear. And for the first time in a long time, the train was running on time. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old wood, but beneath that sterile scent was the undeniable stench of desperation. Patricia Miller sat at the plaintiff table wearing a pale blue cardigan and a strand of pearls. It was a costume designed to make her look like a benevolent grandmother, rather than a woman who had been dragged out of my building in handcuffs 3 days prior. She was currently out on bail for the fraud charges, but that did not stop her from launching one final suicidal attack. She had filed an emergency motion for custody of Leo, claiming that Jasmine was unfit and that I was a violent influence. It was the act of a drowning woman trying to climb onto the back of the person she tried to drown. Her lawyer was a man named Mr. Sterling. He had slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than my truck. He stood up and walked toward the judge with a confident swagger that made my hands itch. He didn't look at me. He looked at the judge, a stern woman named Judge Thorne, who had been on the bench for 20 years. "Your Honor," Mr. Sterling began, his voice smooth as oil, "we are here today because a child is in danger. My client, Mrs. Miller, is a pillar of the community. She is a victim of a misunderstanding that is currently being cleared up in criminal court, but that does not change the fact that she is the only stable figure in her grandson's life." He turned and pointed a finger at me. "The grandfather, Mr. Walter Hayes, has a documented history of aggression. We have dug into his past, Your Honor. In 1984, Mr. Hayes was arrested during a union strike. He was charged with disorderly conduct. Is this the kind of man we want raising a vulnerable 4-year-old boy? A man who fights in the streets? A man who uses intimidation tactics to evict his own family members?" I sat there stone-faced. 1984. I was arrested because I stood in a picket line to demand safety equipment for my crew after a boiler explosion killed 2 of my friends. I was arrested for refusing to move when the company sent strikebreakers to beat us. I wore that arrest like a badge of honor. But here in this air-conditioned room, this lawyer was twisting my integrity into violence. Sterling continued pacing back and forth. And let us look at the mother, Jasmine Hayes. A woman who, by her own admission, has no residence of her own. She is living in her father's house, dependent on his charity. She has displayed erratic behavior. She has isolated the child from his father. Your Honor, we are asking for temporary emergency custody to be granted to Mrs. Miller until the mother can prove she is financially and emotionally stable. I looked at Patricia. She was dabbing her dry eyes with a tissue. She caught my gaze, and for a split second, the mask slipped. She glared at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. She really believed she could win. She believed that her whiteness and her pearls and her high-priced lawyer could erase the reality of who she was. She thought the system was broken enough to give her a child she despised just so she could hurt me. Jasmine grabbed my hand under the table. Her palm was sweating. "Don't worry," I whispered. "He is just making noise." Rachel King stood up. She didn't swagger. She didn't pace. She stood behind her desk straight and tall like a suspension bridge tower. She waited for the room to be completely silent. She adjusted her glasses. She picked up a single piece of paper. "Your Honor," Rachel said, her voice cutting through the humid air of the courtroom. "Mr. Sterling has told you a very interesting story about the past. He wants you to look at 1984. He wants you to look at my client's union record. But I think we should look at something a little more recent. I think we should look at last Tuesday." Rachel walked to the center of the room. "We are not here to discuss Mr. Hayes' history of fighting for workers' rights. We are here to discuss the welfare of Leo Hayes. And the greatest threat to that welfare is sitting right there at the plaintiff table." "Objection," Sterling shouted. "Character assassination overruled," Judge Thorne said, leaning forward. "Continue, Ms. King." Rachel nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." The opposing counsel claims Mrs. Miller is a stable figure. He claims she wishes to provide for the child. However, we have new evidence obtained from the forensic audit of the Miller family finances. This evidence was processed by the FBI yesterday morning and admitted to the court an hour ago. Rachel walked over to Patricia. She placed a document on the table in front of her. "Mrs. Miller," Rachel said, "do you recognize this account number?" Patricia looked at the paper. She blinked. She didn't answer. "Let me refresh your memory," Rachel said, turning to the judge. "This is the transaction history for the Leo Hayes Educational Trust. As we know, the child's father, Brandon Miller, drained this account. He told the police he used it for gambling." That was the story. That was the lie they agreed upon. Rachel paused. The tension in the room was so thick you could choke on it. "But that is not what the numbers say, Your Honor. The money was indeed removed by Brandon Miller, but it didn't go to a casino. It didn't go to a bookie. $50,000 was transferred directly into a shell company called PM Interiors, LLC. Rachel held up another document. "And who is the sole signatory of PM Interiors, LLC? It is not Brandon Miller. It is Patricia Miller." A gasp went through the courtroom. Even the bailiff looked up. I looked at Patricia. Her face had gone completely white. Her lawyer, Mr. Sterling, stopped organizing his papers and stared at his client with a look of horror. He hadn't known. She had lied to him, too. Rachel continued, her voice rising with righteous anger. "Your Honor, this woman didn't just stand by while her son stole from her grandson. She directed him to do it." We have recovered deleted text messages from her phone. On November 3rd, she wrote to Brandon, and I quote, "Take the kid's money. He won't need college if we lose the penthouse. Transfer it to my LLC, and I will hide it from the bankruptcy court." Rachel slammed the folder shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "She stole from a 4-year-old boy, Your Honor. She conspired to embezzle funds meant for his education to pay for her luxury lifestyle. She is not a grandmother. She is a predator. She doesn't want custody of Leo because she loves him. She wants custody because she thinks she can access the remaining assets in the Hayes family trust if she is the guardian. She sees that little boy as a paycheck." Judge Thorne's face turned a shade of red I had never seen on a judge before. She looked at Patricia with an expression of absolute disgust. "Mrs. Miller," Judge Thorne said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "Is this true?" Patricia stood up. She was trembling. But it wasn't the fake trembling of the victim anymore. It was the shaking of a cornered rat. "It was a loan," she shrieked. Her voice cracked, breaking into a hysterical sob. "I was going to pay it back. I needed to stage the apartment. We were going to flip it. I did it for the family." "Sit down!" Judge Thorne roared, but Patricia didn't sit down. She looked around the room, wild-eyed. "You don't understand," she yelled, pointing at me. "He tricked us. He set us up. That money was ours. We deserved it. We are the Millers. We are not supposed to lose to people like them." There it was, the truth finally screaming out loud. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about the house. It was about her inability to accept that she had been bested by a black man she considered beneath her. Mr. Sterling put his head in his hands. He knew it was over. He moved away from his client, physically distancing himself from the blast radius. Judge Thorne banged her gavel. It sounded like a judgment from God. "I have heard enough," the judge said. "The plaintiff's motion for custody is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, I am granting full legal and physical custody of Leo Hayes to his mother, Jasmine Hayes. I am also issuing a permanent restraining order against Patricia Miller and Brandon Miller. You are to come nowhere near this child or his family for the rest of your natural lives." But the judge wasn't finished. She looked at the bailiff. "Bailiff, secure the courtroom. No one leaves." Patricia looked around, confused. "What? What is happening? I want to go home. Judge Thorne looked at the back of the room. Agent Miller, are you present? Yes, Your Honor. Agent Miller said, stepping out from the back row where he had been sitting quietly next to me. Based on the evidence presented by Ms. King regarding the direct theft of trust funds and the admission of guilt we just heard, I am revoking Mrs. Miller's bail on her previous charges. I am also remanding her into custody for new charges of embezzlement and perjury. Patricia's eyes went wide. No, you can't. I paid bail. You paid bail with money that likely came from criminal activity, Judge Thorne said coldly. Bail is revoked. Take her into custody. I watched as Agent Miller and 2 court officers walked toward the plaintiff table. Patricia tried to back away, but there was nowhere to go. She backed into the wooden railing. Don't touch me, she screamed. I am Patricia Miller. Turn around and place your hands behind your back, Agent Miller said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The authority in his voice was absolute. Patricia looked at her lawyer. Do something, Mr. Sterling began packing his briefcase. I can't help you, Patricia. You lied to the court. You are on your own. The officers grabbed her arms. They spun her around. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud and metallic. Click, click, click. It was the sound of a steel door slamming on a life of privilege. Patricia began to wail. It was a high, thin sound like a siren. Walter, she screamed, looking across the aisle at me. Walter, please tell them we can make a deal. I will sign the quitclaim. I will give it all back. Just don't let them take me to prison. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at the woman who had made my daughter sleep in a van. I looked at the woman who had stolen my grandson's future. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just looked at her with a profound weariness. You have nothing left to trade, Patricia, I said. You spent it all. I turned my back on her. Come on, Jasmine, I said, offering my arm to my daughter. Let's go pick up Leo. As we walked down the center aisle, the sound of Patricia screaming my name faded behind us. The heavy double doors of the courtroom swung open and we stepped out into the hallway. It was quiet. It was bright. Rachel walked out behind us. She looked at me and smiled. That went well, she said. You are a surgeon, Rachel, I said. A surgeon with a scalpel. I try, she said. I walked to the window at the end of the hall. I looked out at the city of Chicago. The trains were running in the distance, silver snakes sliding along the tracks I had helped build. The world was moving on. The gears were turning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving with them instead of standing in their way. Justice is not a sprint. It is a long, heavy haul. But when that train finally pulls into the station, there is no feeling like it in the world. 6 months have passed since the gavel fell in that courtroom. 6 months since the steel doors closed on Patricia and Brandon Miller. People ask me if I feel guilty about sending my own son-in-law to prison. They ask if I feel bad that an older woman is sitting in a cell wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of her designer silk. I tell them no, I do not feel guilt. I feel balance. I feel the satisfaction of a ledger that has finally been squared. My house is quiet now, but it is a good kind of quiet. It is not the silence of fear that hung over us when Jasmine and Leo first came back. It is the silence of peace. The winter has melted away and the spring has come to Chicago. The oak tree in the backyard is full of green leaves again. The air smells of wet earth and blooming lilacs. I walked into the kitchen this morning and for the first time in a long time, I did not smell fear. I smelled cinnamon. Jasmine was standing at the counter baking muffins. She was wearing an apron covered in flour and she was humming a song. It was a small thing, but to me it was a miracle. 6 months ago, she was a broken woman sleeping in a frozen van. She was terrified of her own shadow. Today she is a woman who has taken back her life. She got her teaching license reinstated. She works at the elementary school 3 blocks away. Every morning, I watch her walk Leo to his preschool class. She walks with her head high. She does not look down when she passes people on the street. She smiles. She has met new friends, real friends, not the fake social climbers that Brandon surrounded her with. These are people who like her for her kindness, not for her address. The apartment in the Millennium Tower is gone. We sold it. We sold every piece of furniture, every curtain, every spoon. We hired a company to clear it out, and I did not want a single penny from that sale. We took the money, and we put it into a new trust for Leo. a trust that is locked down so tight that not even God himself could touch it without a signature from 3 different lawyers. We washed our hands of that place. It was a beautiful building, but it was built on a foundation of lies. And as an engineer, I know that you cannot fix a bad foundation. You have to walk away before it collapses on you. Leo ran into the kitchen chasing the cat. He was holding a large red toy fire truck. The siren was wailing. "Grandpa, look. I am saving the day." I picked him up and swung him around. He felt heavier. He felt solid. He has grown 2 inches in 6 months. His cheeks are pink and full. The shadows under his eyes are gone. He does not ask about his father anymore. Jasmine told him that his daddy went away to learn how to be a better person. It is a kind lie. I hope one day it becomes the truth, but I doubt it. Some metal is too rusted to be salvaged. I put Leo down, and he ran back to his game. Jasmine looked at me and smiled. "Coffee is ready, Dad." I sat at the table, the same table where we plotted our war against the Millers. The burner phones are gone. The legal pads are gone. Now the table is covered with coloring books and permission slips. "We made it, Dad," she said softly. "We did," I said. "But we didn't just survive, Jasmine. We evolved. You are stronger now than you ever were." I looked at my daughter. She is not the same girl who signed those papers out of fear. She is a mother who stood up to a hurricane and didn't blink. I finished my coffee and stood up. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I have a date," I said. She knew where I was going. I put on my jacket. I grabbed a bunch of fresh tulips from the vase on the counter. I walked out to my truck. The Ford F-150 is old, but the engine still purrs. It is reliable. It has scars and dents, but it still runs. Just like me. The drive to the cemetery was peaceful. The traffic was light. I rolled the window down and let the wind hit my face. I thought about the journey we had been on. I thought about the night in the gas station. I thought about the shame of the police officers pushing me. I thought about the look on Patricia's face when the video played. It felt like a lifetime ago. I pulled through the iron gates of the cemetery. I parked under the big willow tree. I walked up the hill to the spot where my wife rests. The stone is gray granite, simple and strong, just like she was. Martha Hayes, beloved wife, devoted mother. I knelt down on the grass. The ground was soft. I used my handkerchief to wipe a little bit of dust from her name. I placed the tulips in the holder. "Hello, my love," I said. The wind rustled through the trees. It sounded like a whisper. "I know I haven't been here in a while," I said. "I have been busy. I had some work to do." I sat down on the grass, crossing my legs. I looked at the stone. "You always told me I was too hard, Martha. You told me I needed to be softer with people. You told me that you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. And for 40 years I tried to listen to you. I tried to be the gentle man you wanted me to be." I paused, taking a deep breath. "But Martha, sometimes honey is not enough. Sometimes the world is not full of flies. Sometimes it is full of wolves. And you cannot catch a wolf with honey. You catch a wolf with a trap." I told her everything. I told her about the van. I told her about the theft. I told her about the way they looked at us, the way they thought our skin made us weak, the way they thought our kindness made us stupid. "I had to become the old Walter again," I whispered. "The Walter from the rail yards. The Walter who fought in the strikes. I had to take off the nice clothes you bought me and put on the armor. I had to break them, Martha. Because if I didn't break them, they were going to erase us. They were going to take Jasmine and turn her into a ghost. They were going to take Leo and turn him into a monster." I felt a tear run down my cheek. It was cold in the breeze. "I hope you can forgive me for the things I did. I hope you can forgive me for the anger I carried. But I want you to know that the family is safe, the house is safe, the money is safe, and most importantly, our dignity is safe. No one will ever look down on a Hayes again, not while I am breathing." I sat there for a long time. I watched the clouds move across the sky. I felt a sense of release. I felt like she heard me. I felt like she understood. She was the heart of our family, but I was the shield, and a shield is meant to take the blows so the heart can keep beating. I stood up. My knees cracked. I am getting older. The fight took a lot out of me, but I am not done yet. "Rest well, my love," I said. "I will bring Leo next week. He wants to show you his new truck." I walked back to the truck. I didn't go home immediately. I had one more stop to make. I drove out to the lake, the same lake where I was fishing the night I found them. It seemed fitting to end it where it began. I parked the truck and grabbed my gear. I walked down to the pier. The water was glass. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. I set up 2 chairs, one for me, one for a ghost, or maybe one for the future. I cast my line into the water. The sound of the reel singing was music to my ears. Plop. The lure hit the water and sank. I sat down and waited. Fishing is not about catching fish. People who think fishing is about the catch don't understand the sport. Fishing is about patience. It is about understanding what is happening beneath the surface where you cannot see. It is about feeling the tension on the line and knowing exactly when to strike. Brandon and Patricia didn't understand fishing. They saw the bait and they bit. They didn't see the hook, they didn't see the line, and they certainly didn't see the man holding the rod. They thought they were the sharks in the ocean. They thought they could eat whatever they wanted. But they forgot that there is always a bigger fish. And sometimes the biggest fish is the one that stays quiet at the bottom waiting for the right moment to move. I heard footsteps on the wood planks behind me. I didn't turn around. I knew the cadence. Small, fast steps followed by confident, steady ones. Grandpa, I turned. Leo was running toward me, holding his own little fishing pole. Jasmine was walking behind him, smiling. "You started without us," Leo shouted. "I was just testing the water, little man," I said. "Come here, sit next to me." I helped him cast his line. It didn't go very far, but it was a start. We sat there side by side, the old engineer and the little boy. Grandpa, Leo asked, staring at the bobber. "How do you know if a fish is there?" "You don't," I said. "You just have to trust that if you wait long enough, the truth will come to the surface." "Is it hard to catch a big fish?" he asked. "It is not hard," I said, putting my arm around him. "But you have to be strong. You have to hold the line. And you can never ever let go of the things that matter." "Like the pole?" he asked. "Like your family," I said. The sun dipped below the horizon. The stars began to come out. The water was dark and deep and full of mysteries. But I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. I had walked through the darkest night of my life, and I had brought my family out into the dawn. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It could be the lawyers. It could be the bank. It didn't matter. The war was over. The paperwork was done. I looked at Jasmine. She was leaning against the railing, looking at the water. She looked peaceful. I looked at Leo. He was watching his bobber with intense focus. I looked at my hands. They were old hands. Scarred hands. Black hands. Hands that had built railroads. Hands that had built a home. Hands that had dismantled an empire of greed. I took a deep breath of the cool lake air. I am Walter Hayes. I am a father. I am a grandfather. And I am finally at rest. Leo's bobber dipped under the water. "Grandpa," he yelled. "I got one." "Pull, Leo," I said, helping him hold the rod. "Pull." We reeled it in together. It was a small fish, but to Leo, it was a whale. He laughed, a pure joy-filled sound that echoed across the lake. We threw the fish back. We watched it swim away, disappearing into the deep. We packed up our gear. We walked back to the truck together. The gravel crunched under our boots. "Ready to go home?" Dad, Jasmine asked. "Yes," I said. "Let's go home." We drove away, leaving the lake behind. The road ahead was long and winding, but the headlights were bright and the engine was strong. And for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where we were going. Here is the lesson learned and the call to action written in the same style as the script for the AI voiceover. Looking back at the wreckage of the last 6 months, I realized that this was never just about money or a luxury apartment in the sky. It was about something far more fragile and far more valuable. It was about dignity. I learned that there are people in this world like Patricia and Brandon who view kindness as a weakness to be exploited. They look at a quiet man in work clothes and they see a victim. They do not see the decades of discipline it took to build that silence. They thought they could break us because they believed their own lie. They believed that their status and their arrogance made them untouchable. But the most important lesson I learned is about the true definition of family. Family is not just blood. Blood is a biological accident. Family is a fortress you build with your own hands. It is the people who stand beside you in the freezing cold, not the ones who lock you out. I had to learn that protecting my daughter meant breaking the heart of the man she loved, because sometimes love is a blindfold that keeps you from seeing the knife in your back. To anyone out there facing a giant, whether it is a toxic relative, a corrupt boss, or a system that tells you that you do not belong, listen to me. Do not scream. Do not rage. Screaming is what they want because it validates them. Instead, be the ice. Be the steel. Quiet preparation is the loudest noise you can make. Let them underestimate you. Let them think they have won, because the longer they spend celebrating the victory they haven't earned, the deeper they dig their own grave. Justice is not something that is given to you. It is something you have to engineer, and you have the blueprints in your hands. If this story resonated with you, or if you have ever had to stand tall against someone who tried to make you feel small, please let me know in the comments below. Tell me which city you are listening from and share your own story of justice. Do not forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories about truth and resilience. Until next time, keep your head high and your powder dry.